What's up, party people, and welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. Each week we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the upcoming Classic servers. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts, but yours. If you're new to the show, Countdown to Classic goes through your expert input on everything relating to the upcoming release of World of Warcraft Classic. Today, we've got Vanilla WoW dungeon designer John Staats back to talk about the making of Molten Core. Then we're having a huge chat about the games of E3 that will try and tear you away from World of Warcraft Classic. And we round it out by talking world buffs and a part 2 from our stream sniping call last week. So you all know the drill by now. This is a community-based podcast. So if you like what you're hearing, join the Discord now and keep the conversations going with us all over there. Follow me on Twitter at Counts2Classic with the number 2. Email me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. And please do be sure to tell a friend about the show and spread the love that way. And don't forget, you can also PM me a voicemail for the show via Discord. Everything you'll need is in the show notes for each episode, along with the show's Patreon link if you'd really like to help keep the show going. Or if subscriptions aren't your thing, then you can help keep the lights on at Countdown by checking out the show's tip jar over at Ko-Fi. There's also the show's merch store with some great designs over there for t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, etc. So be sure to check that link too. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into it with Calling Countdown. All right, it's time for another Countdown to Classic, John Staats Dungeon Design segment. John, it's so good to have you back, fresh off the heels of your fantastic first episode. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you again for having me back. It's good to be back and talking about WoW. It's an exciting time actually for WoW people, certainly for the classic people and the people who missed the game, the original game. So yeah, it's going to be cool.
I've got to say, John, one of the things that's so refreshing about, people like yourself and Kevin Jordan is you do often repeat that when I'm sort of sitting here constantly, obnoxiously apologizing to you guys. I go, oh God, I'm so sorry. I take up so much of your time. I'm so sorry. And both of you have been like, Josh, we love talking about this stuff. Don't worry about it.
It's fun. I mean, don't feel that you're wearing out a welcome or something like. I feel like I might be wearing out my welcome.
No.
Please, if you come up with content or ideas, you pinged me a couple ideas, and I thought that would be great. Talking about my book, like as a book review type of thing, that would be a cool idea for the show. So yeah, and if it's something that I don't think there's a lot of content in that, I'll just let you know. So hopefully we'll get a lot of swinging episodes going.
Absolutely, and now that you've mentioned it, we might have to hold you down to that one. So I floated the idea of once we're done with this dungeon design segment, however many episodes we do on going through a lot of the instances in Vanilla World of Warcraft, I said, John, wouldn't it be fun if we had a few listeners on to go through a bit of a book review of the WoW Diary? And you, luckily enough, were more than up for that idea. So we'll have to do that one later down the track as well. But while we're mentioning it, once again, obviously, everyone, the WoW Diary, John Staats, available now on Amazon. Please do go and pick that one up to get to know what John has put out there for the classic community and the great story behind the making of World of Warcraft. But John, I also mentioned to you, I might pick up a few things here and there when we do these segments on things that I picked up or read in the book that I'd love to hear a bit more about, even if it's just a little bit of a light tasting of what's in the book and an extrapolation on some of the points. And I mentioned to you that we had Scott Hartzman, the producer of EverQuest, on the show a few weeks ago, and I asked him to talk more about, the how do I term this? The back and forth between the camps in terms of, you guys getting the EverQuest guys to play a build of WoW, but not giving them all of the game. And he said that they knew what you were doing. But I'd ask you again, you talk about that relationship between different developers, through the diary. And, were there friends that you made, in other companies that were working on other great MMORPGs that you thought like, wow, I wish this person was on the WoW team. They've got some great ideas. And how did it all work with the networking?
Well, it was, it's all Southern California, at least a lot of the game developers that, we had contact with. We'd actually had, I think I mentioned this in the book. I can't remember if I talked about it or not. We even had a paintball scrimmage between Vermont at the time. I can't remember if I ever mentioned that in the book or not, but yeah, we had a few paintball fans, and we got a bunch of EverQuest guys. This is before we announced World of Warcraft, by the way. So a bunch of us are going, oh, it's like pump them for information. Well, we had these questions, like loaded questions, like what were the worst decisions like you made? Like obviously, what were some of the mistakes you wish you hadn't have done? And we got, depending on who we asked, we got a different question. Like the only one I remember was one of the designers for, I think, the healer class had a spell for all heal. And it was a spell that just brought somebody back up to their maximum health. And he said that the spell didn't scale, and there was no way to actually do anything with it. It was like the best spell in the game. So stuff like that is what he answered. And there's some one-upmanship where we'd say, like, what's the most people that ever connected to EverQuest at the same time? And this is, I won't say who it was because he's not a Blizzard anymore, but there's a lot of, because we're all nerds, okay, and there's a lot of one-upmanship. When somebody finds a $5 bill, the other guy says, "Oh, I found the $20 bill sometime." So there's like this total nerdy type of thing. And one of us asked, like, what was the highest connection he had ever had in EverQuest? And I think he said something like, "Oh, it was something, something, something." And of course, the guy who he actually came from QA, he was on Diablo at the time. Now, Diablo has a completely different connection. The amount of information you're sending to a server in Diablo is way, way lighter of a load because it's not an MMO. Diablo 2 was just, it's little instances. You don't have to update nearly as much information. And so he says, well, in Diablo, we had X many, and X happened to be like 20 times what the EverQuest guy just actually said, even though it's comparing apples to oranges. Right. So you get some of that, but honestly, most of it is, it's a hard industry. There's a lot of vulnerability that people have, and there's honestly a lot of sympathy and well-wishing between studios. I think the only studio that I really know of that didn't actually like Blizzard was Westwood Studios. They developed real-time strategy games, and they had this series Dune. Yeah, they had the property Dune, and they basically came up with it. And Blizzard said, "Oh, we like that. Let's do that, but let's polish the game over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and come up with Warcraft." So they held real animosity over that. They had some genuine animosity that just, also I think the old, this is before I was even there. They'd have like little rivalries where they'd paintball each other's building, like I've heard of some, late at night drive-bys where they paint. Now the paint fades into water. So like they probably don't even know this even happened, but they would just do little silly things like that. When the CEO was a lot younger. Very good. Real. And the studios were a lot smaller too, like 20-person studios. Real quick, who was the Rambo of the Blizzard office in paintball? Oh, gee. Let's see. Josh Kurtz probably was he's the guy that put it together. He had the Angel. That was the gun that everybody wanted. I still remember the name. It was the Angel.
What did he do on WoW?
I think it was called. He was a world designer.
Okay.
He was David Ray's right-hand man. He started out doing quests, but it's kind of funny. When he submitted his quests, he included a 25-page storyline for his area that he did.
Oh,
You're
wow.
just and no one had even thought of doing like a 25-page story for their area just to support it. And we saw that and it's like that is so nerdy, and it's so cool that he spent so much time. He's going to be a good employee.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
how you catch an eye.
he went from QA to game development, and that's how a lot of the game developers, and especially early Blizzard, rose up.
Very good.
That we knew. Okay, so
very good. All right, well, let's get into another dungeon dive, everyone, and we're going to be doing Molten Core today. And I'm just being reminded in Twitch chat, John, that spell you might have been thinking of in EverQuest, was that the cleric spell Complete Heal? Is that what you were thinking of?
Yeah, I think he used the colloquial term all heal. That was probably what they would say, rather than no one's going to spell out anything in, first of all, an MMO, of course, right? So it's probably AH, or something like that. So everybody knows what AH. So.
All right. Well, look, we've got two callers on the line again, and we're joined once again by Vilius. How are you, mate?
Good. Thanks to be here.
Great having you here. And a first-time caller, CrazyK. How are you?
Hey guys, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Hey. So great to have you here. Now, John, as you heard, Molten Core, all of it, we're going to tear it apart like we did with BRD. Relatively similarly themed areas in terms of the lava and the heat and the cave and whatnot, but there might have been some differences along the way in terms of design decisions. So as I do, John, I'll start you off very generally, and then we'll get the guys to chip in with their questions on the specificities of the area. But as you know, I've never done Molten Core. I've seen bits and pieces on videos, but I haven't walked through there myself. But I'll ask you this, Molten Core, were you happy?
Oh, yes. It has not the unique quality of being a ninja dungeon, which what I mean by that is none of it was on the producer's schedule. Like, it wasn't approved. It was just spontaneously, a bunch of the developers just came up with it. So I kind of like it for that. I mean, that's who I am. I'm a ninja.
If I can do this, John, because I actually did want to get into this, and now that you've raised it organically, I think we've got the time now to really do a bit of a deeper dive on this famous story about Molten Core coming together in all of a week. So if I can ask you a bit of an oral history on who was involved, how the idea spawned, what exactly happened in terms of work done, and whether or not the whole time you guys were thinking, oh, this won't be a thing, and then it just comes in. Like, what's the real history of Molten Core?
Wow. Let's see. Boy, I wrote a lot about this. I wrote about the Molten Core, how we did it in my book, The WoW Diary, but I also wrote about it in supplemental articles. If you go to my website, whenitsready.com, and you go to articles and interviews, there's 4 articles at the bottom of the list that one was on Scholomance, one was on Warsong Gulch, and one of them was a hit list of all of the dungeons that I built. Now, Scholomance and Warsong were also ninja dungeons or ninja areas, so maybe that's, says a little bit about me, what I like. So, so I went into, it was actually, now I think about it, it was in my, in my book. It's the tail end of the book. It was, Jeff knew the importance of, and I say Jeff Kaplan. Jeff Kaplan knew the importance of end game content, and we had the monster models already built. That's actually the biggest asset when you're looking at the production of the dungeon, of any dungeon. That's the thing. Do the models have animations? Do they have the textures? Or, that is a big get. Once you have that, it's a little bit smaller step to actually build the dungeons. So we did have a lot of that built. I think Ragnaros was not animated, but we had gone so far that the producers are like, okay, we'll put them on the schedule because they're the ones who are in charge of shipping the game on time. So, everybody would don't be blaming the producers as the guys who are coming down on things, because they're the ones they're the advocates for the fans. The fans want to play the game. So, they keep, they're the disciplinary, wing of production, making sure everybody hits their deadlines. But we had these. We had all the textures for the BlokkaRoach set. We had the monsters. Jeff just came in and said, "Hey, we've got Scott Mercer on Team 1, completely different team. They were working on World of Warcraft. I'm sorry, They were working on Warcraft 3 at the time. He has some time to actually script monsters. He was a level designer. And for Warcraft 3, a level designer is a scripting position. They're really not building things they are, but it's more like drop and drag. It's a lot less art intensive for what WoW was doing. So he was on board. He's an EverQuest fan. So we have Scott Mercer on board. He knew that I was a ninja. Like I just loved the idea of working after hours and on weekends on stuff that wasn't approved, just because usually that's the cooler stuff. So he didn't even have to ask me. By the time he got to the end of his first sentence, I was on board. He had me at hello. So he tells me about how fast can you build a dungeon, a big cave. And I'd done so many caves, so many micro dungeons where it's gold mines, all the non-instance caves in the world. I did pretty much 90% of them. And I did the Wailing Caverns and Black Fathom Deeps, lots of caves. I could build this stuff quickly. And I told him the very fastest would be a week. And that was the very fast. He's like, whoa, okay. Well, he was hoping to get it done in a month. So a week was good. A week was very good. So I did it in a week. And I just used the whole dungeon has 3 textures, I think. There's the ground texture, the wall texture, and the transition texture. It's then the ceiling texture. So maybe 4 textures. Super, super simple to do. I'm not super proud of the dungeon. There's some things I would like to have changed, but I just had the idea of, okay, I knew Metzen's story about Ragnaros. Okay. I knew that because I had built BlokkaRoach Depths, and I knew the story between the Dark-Eyed Dwarves being the guys who discovered Ragnaros and are kind of summoning him, to, do their bidding or change the way the world is or something. So I knew that kind of vibe. And I saw all the demon models going, okay, this is just, you build hell. That's super easy. And the thing that this dungeon stands out is that it had red fog. And all the dungeons that I've ever done, the only compliments I ever get are the Molten Core. And it's because not of me being, a good level designer. It's people love the red fog. So there's something visceral about the red fog that people really respond to, and it's just very atmospheric. And, I didn't actually build the red fog. Gary Plattner he was one of the 3D artists building things like particle effects, which fog falls into. So he actually built the fog, and I just placed it around, and that's what made the dungeon have so much atmosphere, which is why there were so many people complimentary about the Molten Core. It had nothing to do with me at all. Okay. And I had the whole thing built in 2 days. So it was 2 days built. That was just the rough pass. Then I maybe took a couple weeks of doing lava falls, a little particle effects here and there. But yeah, it was a very fastly built dungeon, and I think it looks like to a game developer. Oh yeah, they're looking at this and go, oh, this is nothing. This is like this is really an easy thing to build. So. I don't want to pat myself too much on the back for this one.
No, fair enough. I think you did a great job from what I've seen and from what I've heard from all the love that it gets from the listeners. And in that vein, I'll throw it over to you guys. CrazyK, let's start with you. Now, what's your opening salvo to John there about the design of Molten Core?
So it's actually, I don't think, or I don't know if that's an intended one, but there is this one famous shortcut jump at the start of Molten Core before the bridge. Was that just an happy little accident that raiders used as a shortcut, or was it kind of sneakily intended?
Well, no, it was not intended. Then I think as they were doing playthroughs of BRD, I think Kaplan said, "Hey, John, people are starting to jump down here. They're going to try it out. You might as well make it more accessible, because they're probably going to try to cheese the collision anyway. So make it look like it was kind of." And I actually didn't develop the geometry underneath BRD is so simple. It's very, very underdeveloped. So I kind of wish I actually would have polished it up if I knew it was going to be used a lot more. But yeah, the players discovered it, doing playtesters probably before alpha discovered that BRD is really easy to do. So I probably massaged the geometry to make it a little bit more possible. Tough was okay. We didn't mind it being tough, but we didn't want it to be a trap either, where everybody learns, oh, you can't go through it that way. So yeah, it evolved, and we learned also that it didn't break the content in our game. Content was one of the things that we were afraid that we would not have enough of. So when we realized, we have enough content, we say, well, frick it, let's put the shortcuts in. They're not breaking the game. So that's kind of how that worked.
It's also pretty nice because things like that make players just explore the environment, not just inside the raid, but also outside, because they find stuff like this and they think, maybe there's something else like that intentional. So it's nice to find those little Easter eggs here and there.
Yeah, that it works especially well because what it does is players take ownership of the area that they traverse through. Hey, I'm the reason that we got here so quickly. It's not that the designers massage the geometry, and it is organically developed. We didn't plan for it, but I do agree with you. Yeah, that when players can at least when they feel that they're getting ahead or cheating or cheesing something, there should be a little reward, for using their brain, especially if it doesn't break the game. I think that's a great thing.
Vilius, I'll throw it over to you. What have you got for John in regards to Molten Core?
So I wanted to ask about Rag's room because I remember the first time going through there, it's this giant spiral, and you're sort of at the center is the second in command who you've defeated all the bosses before that. And it's this immense building of anticipation. So is that, I'm assuming that was intentional, but how did you deal with that in terms of the design?
Yeah. So, it was very late in the game when I realized that there could actually be very big monsters. Most of the art team didn't realize there were going to be very big mobs. We didn't, we were fighting skeletons and kobolds and, that sort of thing. And then somebody very at the tail end of the project, that's when someone actually textured the dragon. The dragon had crazy animations and crazy texture usage and took a lot of engineering to get the dragon to even work. So it was kind of put off until the very end. And then once they spawned him in the game, the artists were like, wait a minute. He's huge. This is like crazy. So, I didn't know how, and I knew Ragnaros is going to be a god. Okay, he's one of the. I think I don't quote me on this. I think he was one of the old gods, or I don't know.
Elemental Lord, I think, is what they call it.
Okay, maybe Elemental Lords. Okay, but I'm thinking, okay, so this guy he's as close to a deity as we had seen. So I wanted something. What's perfect is a circle. So I designed the entire dungeon to be a circle around Ragnaros in the center, and then I just kept with that circular design, that little spiral in the center. And actually, it was a circle. We cut off the area between the dogs and Golemag. Between the dogs and Golemag, there was a thin passage connecting the two, and that's actually the only change Jeff asked me to get rid of, and saying, "Hey, this is great, but we don't mind players double backing. It would be better to just have like two forks surrounding the center dungeon," and that was fine with me. Jeff is so nervous about asking for changes like that. He doesn't know how fluid. It didn't make any difference to me. I'd put no thought into it. So, I made the change. And the one thing I would change about this dungeon, and it kind of kills me that I didn't do this, is I would love, when we're talking about Ragnaros's room, this would be so freaking epic. I really regret I didn't do this. Is what I want to do is pull the very center of that floor down. Okay. So that while it's a spiral, it's also flowing downward. Okay. And that does a number of things. Okay. It gets rid of that horizontal plane. Okay. When you're on a big flat area, I loved that when I built Blackrock Mountain, I liked that one elevation was way higher than the other. When you're running around that ring, it's nice that there's an elevation change. It's kind of boring if it's perfectly flat. Okay. So, and this is a level designer thing. I don't know how many people are interested in this, but like visually it stimulates the eye rather than having this horizontal. You're kind of looking down on people, as you're getting closer and closer. And frankly, you see more of Ragnaros in your view if you're coming in. So you're not looking up all the time to see Ragnaros. Like if there's at least some spiral, and then it would also be easier to jump from one of those rings to the other. There could have been a mini game, with that. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe one of the devs on World of Warcraft will hear this and they'll rebuild that dungeon for when they, of course, Molten Core is probably going to be up and running by the time Classic launches anyway. But that's the one change I would have done differently.
John, if I can ask, just in regards to, and appreciating that obviously everything that happened in Molten Core was within the time constraints that you've talked about. Now, in terms of the placement of the other bosses, what were you trying to do in terms of, you've already talked about Jeff asking you to change the Golemag situation, and we've had listener Balls of Steel again asking in Twitch chat about that area that you've just explained about, the ramp to Majordomo, and still having those areas for Golemag and Sulfuron Harbinger fairly close by. But in terms of the other bosses as well, were you trying to span everything out as much as you could, or still keep it sort of feeling tight and constrictive? What was the plan there with boss placement?
As far as boss placement, I knew that there were going to be about 7 bosses in the dungeon. Actually, may have not even known that. I knew that I was excited that there were going to be big boss. I had no idea what boss was going where at all. There was no idea. I didn't know where, what's the Baron?
Baron
Geddon. Oh yeah. He was by the way, my favorite fight in the Molten Core. I was one of the, I was actually, I think the only person on the WoW team who raided the Molten Core. Everyone was crunching, fixing bugs. I was playing the game after we shipped the game. I had I had the highest level character on the team, but I think me and maybe Scott Harton, the guy that built the engine, the programmer who wrote the engine. I think we were the only two raiders to even go through the Molten Core at the time when it came out. So, I didn't know anything about the where the monsters were, where the bosses were going to go. I think the nature of the size meant there's going to be a lot more patrols going on. We were testing how, big raid groups would do with pulling patrols. And I think it's just worked. There's so many things that worked well. And by the way, the one reason why the Molten Core is just so freaking awesome is that you did have game designers who were wanting to design raids for years while we were building World of Warcraft. We're going, what could we do with, this game mechanic or that game mechanic, and that's just, it's kind of like the first album that a rock band comes out with is just the best album in the world. It's because they spend 6 years, coming up with ideas for each individual song. That was basically the Molten Core. That's our debut album. So they were pent up with ideas. They had a lot of cool mechanics and but I, as far as me having any at all, I had no say at all. I had no idea what any of the fights were going to be. Didn't know. I pictured the area where the dogs were going to be. I thought that'd be just a giant monster stomping around. Apparently we did dogs. So that was kind of a surprise, but, it was just a cool area.
Very good. All right, CrazyK, I'll throw it back to you, mate. What else have you got for John?
So that's actually a question from one of my guildies, and the question is, since Lower Blackrock Spire is kind of leaned onto the Mines of Moria from Lord of the Rings, is
absolutely.
there any connection between Ragnaros and maybe Balrog from Lord of the Rings?
No, actually, Ragnaros was he was concepted before we actually saw Lord of the Rings.
You mentioned in the BRD chat, John, though, the actual summoning, though, or I think you mentioned in BRD chat that the Dark Iron Dwarves mining down was sort of similar to the Lord of the Rings thing.
Yeah, that was the story. Yeah, that's right. That was BRD.
But Ragnaros himself, in terms of the Balrog,
like the lore. Oh yeah, the lore was very similar to the Balrog. I think that's how the dwarves awakened the Balrog or something. But that was exactly the same story. But the actual design Moria was not really influential, and the actual look of Ragnaros wasn't supposed to be. We knew it was going to be fire, so there's only so many ways you could go with fire. So there's going to be a lot of similarities with monster fire designs. But no, he was like Brandon Idle he basically designed the look of World of Warcraft in a lot of ways. He designed, and I kind of get into this. When he did the Null and the Kobold, those were the first monsters that were kind of cartoony. And in 3D, I can't think of a lot of games that were like that weren't, there's cartoony cell shaded games on console, but like he had just made a look and we went, oh my God, that's possible. We can actually really, make these guys like really wonky looking. This is kind of cool. So he had done, a lot of the monster designs and he did the elementals. I think, knowing that Ragnaros was an elemental, he just took the elemental design and turned it up to 11. That's basically where Ragnaros's look came from.
Okay. Vilius, what have you got for John?
With, Ragnaros is kind of like the elemental lord of fire, and you touch on the other ones like Water and Thunder for some quests that involve Molten Core, but did you ever pitch like doing full raids of those other elemental storylines, or was it always kind of just a side quest?
No, it would have been something like that. A pitch like that would have been like a world design type of thing. It was probably a Metzen call to just go with Ragnaros. Just fire is way cooler than water or air. I mean, it's basically the easiest thing to do. Also, game developers like the first dungeon anybody does is usually like a fire and lava because it's a very easy visual to impress people with. So we kind of went with that. There wasn't a whole lot of worry about being complete by hitting the other elements because, we're talking about a fantasy universe that has waited probably 10 years or maybe not 10 years, but close to it for, unbottling all kinds of things. Like he wanted to do dragons. He wanted to do the demons. He wanted to do all kinds of these crazy cool ideas that, I mean, he comes up with an idea and then 9 months later, the idea is fleshed out. So it takes a long time for these things to happen. So, I think people would have, and there's a logic behind it, like why he probably didn't go for like water and earth and air, is that people would probably be tired of killing elementals by that time. It's nice to change it up and then hit dragons for a while and then change it up and, do demons for a while or whatever, that's what basically, Burning Crusade was, is we wanted, we hadn't done any outer space stuff or demons. So, that's where we hit Burning Crusade pretty heavy on those themes. So there's actually thought and planning. Okay, this is kind of contradicts a lot of what I'm saying, is when you're flowing players from zone to zone, you want to change things up to do just a bunch of elementals. And frankly, everybody forgets how long they were actually beating on Ragnaros before they actually took him down. So, we have fond memories, what is with the heart grows fonder with time, but we forget that if we were spending, 6 months, 9 months killing the fire elemental, do we really want to spend 6 or 9 months more on the water elemental and the earth elemental? We could have done it, but it was just bigger fish to fry, really.
John, I'll agree with you in regards to the fire elemental probably being the coolest one to go with, because I don't think by wind be purged it has quite the same ring to it. So it's probably
yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah.
I'll ask this question, John, from Twitch chat from listener Taladril, who asks, John, what's the one thing that you think Molten Core succeeded in that perhaps the other raids didn't? And what's something that perhaps it lacked that other raids did really well?
Oh, wow. I can say that it's really the last time we thought of schools of magic influencing the gear set. We had the fire set. To get past Geddon, you really needed your raid to be geared up because there's a lot of fire damage. And we knew that we wanted to ramp up the gear. And there was a theory, and I still think that the theory was valid. We didn't go with it, that people would be fine with a side grade where you have gear that is more resistance to fire. And I think the next tier was nature. I think BlokkaRoach
AQ dealt with that.
No. Blackwing's Lair. Blackwing's Lair was I think a poison. I think
we got that. Well, in AQ40 is when they brought in a lot of that nature resistance requirement for Princess Uhu run.
Okay, I did AQ20, so I actually didn't even know that. So Oh, well, let me back away from that completely then. Good for them. I liked the idea of like side grades, because the problem is that, okay, it's not as cool, but then you have inflation problems with power, and you're looking at numbers that are like more suited for a science fiction game when you're hitting for, 3,500,600, 20,000. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, so that is probably one difference that comes to mind. What is that? I think
anything it lacked that you think the other dungeons really nailed that you loved in terms of design?
I think it was good. I think it was balanced. Honestly, Blackwing's Lair was not so balanced. It was very hard. Some of the first, you go from Razor Gore to I think what was his name? Valistras. Valistras. Yeah, it's Valistras. Geez, you talk about two ass beaters. I mean, Valistras. They looked at the stats. Valistras probably still to this day has more kills than any other monster in World of Warcraft. I mean, guilds were just dying over and over because it was a 1 minute fight. It was a 2 minute fight. But part of that is, the game designers are learning what's the design space here. Like, what can we get away with, So, I don't know. It's okay that some of these don't, Fire Maw. There's a way to cheese Fire Maw. It's okay. We learned that, okay, we can't do this in this battle. So let's not do that later on. I just think there is just I think it had a wide range of combat mechanics that were new to Raiders that were they worked. And it kind of set the standard for, okay, this is what raiding's going to be like. And the first one is always going to be thought of fondly because that was your first experience. That's the first girl you kiss. So that's
And John, if I can go into bat for you for a little bit, obviously when the memory is being tested during these calls, because I know that sometimes we get people who say like, oh my God, these World of Warcraft devs, they don't remember this, they don't remember that. These guys made the game. What's going on? And I always say to people, well, they haven't been playing private servers for years on end. And we're going back to sometimes things that are 16 years ago in the memory banks in terms of, don't remember. I mean, I say, remember these things were being developed in 02, 03, 04. This is a long time ago. So I'll back you up a bit there.
Yeah, it's I'm still very interested to see how popular the classic servers are going to be. I mean, I imagine, if my hands could put up with, my friends are like, come on, John, let's play classic World of Warcraft. I have friends that I talk to. We play Starfinder, and they really, really want to play World of Warcraft with me again. Like, guys, I have only so much computer time. I have a thing with my hands, and I just can't play games anymore. Like, it's not a one does not simply play World of Warcraft. You know what I'm saying? it's not just, I'll just play this game like I will play any other game. It's, I know myself and I know the game. It's,
all good, mate. All good. Crazy. I'll throw it back to you after this one. John, regular contributor to the show, Ale, asked this about the design of Molten Core. For the final boss, you have to backtrack in the dungeon. Why was the dungeon layout created this way?
That's a good question. Jeff liked the idea of backtracking. The good thing about this is that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but once you cleared a wing, you could, this is again, we weren't entirely sure that people wanted to do the full clear. Okay. So it was okay that instead of just backtracking, we figured people would just release and, repair at Kargath or, their Hearthstone and come maybe a different night to actually kill Ragnaros. But killing Major Domo Executus and Golemag was easy, but the Major Domo, that was kind of a tough fight. And it's okay to do some backtracking. But there was no philosophy that, this is we can do something with this. It's just, if I put the entrance at Golemag into Ragnaros, then that's kind of probably where players would have gone. That would have been the track, but they just looked at my layout and said, backtracking, we'll live with it for now. Yeah, I guess they didn't really use it as a game mechanic. Like there could have been some type of back spawning mechanic, like once Major Domo dies and maybe something patrols but they didn't do anything like that. So no, there wasn't a lot of thought put into other than just looking at my dungeon and going, let's go with that. Yeah.
No worries. CrazyK, you got another one from your guildies for John?
Yeah, actually, and also like a little story what Molten Core in this case means to me.
Go for it.
I mean,
sure.
Molten Core is a good canvas of having one of the biggest wow effects in World of Warcraft in Classic. Besides, of course, first seeing the Gates of Ironforge or seeing Orgrimmar the first time, because in my case, back then, I was around 12 to 13 years. Just create a character. I was around level 20 or 30. My bigger brother, of course, playing since day one, went to play Dota. And of course, he said, hey, you can have my level 60 druid. You can just play the first time. And yeah, I played his character and was instantly thrown into Molten Core with his weight guild because they were I had no idea of anything. I didn't know what enchantments were, consumables, nothing. But just seeing this, big, massive cave with all the mobs in there, being with all your friends, with your 40 men, was just something that I think forged memories for vanilla players that, are just unique in a way because it's, just defined modern gaming raiding. In that way. And just coming to my question also, Ragnaros wasn't killed for 154 days after the release. What is your estimation? How long will it take players or guilds to have the very first Ragnaros kill after the server launch?
Oh my gosh. Jeez. You're talking about a completely different level of commitment. When people first went into, I go into the testing of Molten Core, the internal team, basically artists, designers, people who weren't busy. Anyone who wasn't a programmer had a little time on their hand at the end of WoW to test Molten Core. And like yourself, we're looking at a bar of spells that nobody knew really what were the money makers as far as the spells. We weren't entirely sure about what buffs to put on each other. We weren't buffed. We weren't disciplined. We just had no coordination. And I think the first time, I don't think we killed any of the mobs. Like, we didn't kill any of the trash. None of the trash got killed in the first test of Molten Core. And that was just Jeff going, okay, that's about how much damage 40 people are going to do per second. They're probably not efficient. Let's add 50%. That's what we'll need. He was just getting some numbers of, what the Molten Core was like. So, the first tests, and when the Molten Core went live, the reaction of fans was that it was bugged, that there was no way any of these monsters could be killed. They were just going to wait until Blizzard fixed it. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Because, people really didn't have to hold aggro. Like some of the dungeon monsters were tough where, the tank would have to yell at the rogues and the mages for pulling aggro, but it was nowhere on the scale of aggro management that the Molten Core was. So there was just monsters just one-shotting the rogues and then one-shotting the mages. It felt broken because players hadn't really parsed all the nuance behind the aggro system, and they hadn't figured out all the minute things that we take for granted now. Tanking, like off tanking, that wasn't as well known as it was when people started out. So people, they really thought the game was broken, and they were just going to wait until another theory was that they assumed that there were going to be more levels in the shipping game because they were actually testing the Molten Core in the the beta. Okay, so they were testing it in the beta, and they were just assuming that, they'll raise the level cap to 70, and that'll let us do the Molten Core. Okay, so a lot of people didn't even try the Molten Core. Alex Offersabi was the guild leader of Fires of Heaven. They were actually doing the real testing for Molten Core during the beta, and giving us the really good number and the really good feedback for a lot of the Uber boss fights there. And Alex is he doesn't like games for sissies, so he made sure that we had some tough fights in there. That's for sure.
Fair enough. Now, guys, I'll get you to think of one last quick question for John as I ask this one, and we'll wrap this one up and get into the home turn here. But John, I'll ask this one, a quick listener question again from Twitch chat. And Bear of Pain has asked a number of questions about Thunder Fury, but I might just pick one of them if that's okay, Bear of Pain. And I would be interested to know this one, John. Obviously, it's a bit outside of the realms of the design of Molten Core, but in terms of the feeling within the office when this, item was designed and what the community did with it, Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker, were you guys surprised that it became such a meme and the way in which the community kind of embraced this legendary item?
Most of the office didn't know about it. Okay. And I mean, maybe couple quest designers and one of the artists. I didn't know about it. I didn't know about it until we killed Ragnaros, and like, oh wait, there's an orange. What's the orange thing on it? That's kind of cool. That was just that's born on the wings of the game designers realizing, hey, let's put this epic item in there. The original, I keep referring to my book. I don't do this intentionally.
Go for it.
But I talk about, there's a picture of the Wind Fury at the end. It's a good story, actually. I'll go over it briefly. The first weapon was a scimitar. That's what was used. A scimitar. There wasn't a big handle. There wasn't a big hilt. There wasn't a big blade. It was just a scimitar.
Oh, do you mean as the first model for Thunder Fury?
Yeah, as the first final model. That's what was intended. It wasn't placeholder. One of the I think one of the item designers said, well, we don't have a super big weapon, and I don't want to incur the wrath of the producers by trying to get one of the artists to build one on the sly. So they just said, we'll use a big scimitar. That'll be Wind Fury. And one of the artists, Carlo Aureliano, he saw that's supposed to be a Wing Fury, and he didn't know about it until he read Alex Offersabi wrote a story about it. Okay. And I think it may have been Alex's idea entirely to actually have it in the game. And he was fairly new to the team. He came in at the tail end of development, and he just got this thing going. And then Carlo read the story. He's like, dude, that is the coolest freaking story in the world, and we're using this stupid scimitar for the model. So Carlo, he was a 2D artist, and he does a lot. Oh, his paintings are beautiful. He is that weapon. He learned how to model 3D using a 3D modeler like a 3ds Max. That was his first thing to build an asset for a game, was Wind Fury, and he just had this idea for it, and he got somebody probably to teach him particle effects, or he probably got someone to teach him how to do it himself. But that was just his pet project, to learn how to do 3D modeling in the next week or so. And he came up with this awesome weapon. And that was that's the origin of Wind Fury. But the level designers, inside out, we're bent over the keyboard like a minutia, like an orange item. It only touches a couple people. Alex was the shepherd, kind of like pushing that little idea, along to Carlo, and then getting the quest designers to rig it up. Well, he was a quest designer, actually. He was rigging it up himself, but it could have been just completely ninja'd into the game, to be honest. I actually don't think there was a lot of team awareness at all that was the end prize, because you have to understand, like, most of the dungeons were built years before their monsters were even scripted in there. And at the very end of the game, when we actually have an idea of, how long does it take to level? How much damage are we doing? Only then can you really design items that are going to go into the game as final items. So you kind of don't pay attention for the duration of most of the development cycle. You don't pay attention to the items because they're changing. They're so mutable. They're changing every month. So people weren't paying attention to Wind Fury. That wasn't like a big deal to anyone.
I had
other
no
than Alex and Carlo.
I love that tidbit about, the Thunder Fury, the scimitar. That's fantastic. What could have been. Yeah. But, CrazyK, I'll throw it to you. One last quick question for John from you. What have you got for him?
There's actually something you could only guess, but, do you think, on Retail Classic, they're gonna have the Talisman of Binding Shard also just drop once, like it did back then? Because, of course, I know it was a mistake.
Drop rate.
It was implemented.
Do you remember this one, John? They only had one Talisman of the Binding Shard drop, and then it was taken out of the game after that?
Refresh me of what the talisman actually did.
It was a neck piece, and it wasn't actually all that crash hot. It wasn't anything amazing, I can assure you, but it was a legendary neck piece, and please correct me, anyone, if I'm wrong. And literally one dropped, one player got it, and then they just removed it and sort of said, oh, that wasn't intended to be in the game. And so it was this legendary story about the one and only drop that this player got.
Oh, man. Yeah, I believe that's true. That was probably just a mistake. There probably wasn't a lot of stats on it. And it also, another legendary that you're not prepared for, makes Thunder Fury a lot less cool, because you had to work for Thunder Fury, right? So to just give a necklace to somebody that's on kind of like the same tier, it really makes Thunder Fury a lot less cool. But that's probably a reasonable explanation. But what's more likely of an explanation is that was just a bug. Like, they didn't realize that was in the drop table.
I think it'd be cool, and I would see it within the wheelhouse of Blizzard's sense of humor to do it again. But I mean, we're waiting to see.
That's actually a very good prediction. They won't do it again intentionally unless they do it as a joke. In fact, I'm going to be looking forward. I bet you there's going to be a lot of little Easter eggs in the inside jokes.
I agree.
Oh my God. Let me tell you, the guys that had to rebuild World of Warcraft, like, I talked about how it didn't sound like a good gig to build a game that's already been built before. I think that is going to be where the fertile ground is, where you're allowed to make references to the early game. I think I hope there's tons and tons of Easter eggs like that in there.
And I think Talisman of the Binding Shard is a great way to do it. I think they will try and get that little sort of tongue-in-cheek sense of humor coming through. Right, that's an easy one because that falls in line with how the game was. But as you say, I also wouldn't be shocked if even, we talk about, no changes and all that jazz and just make the game as it was. I really wouldn't be shocked if like one NPC or one little bit of not quest text, if one little like innocuous NPC's speech is, if you talk to some random character up the back of Orgrimmar or something and they just change one line when you speak to him and he says something about the remaking of Classic, I just wouldn't be shocked. We'll see what happens. But
let's just be very excited for the Talisman, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you guys playing the beta?
I have been, yeah. It's been a lot of fun, I can tell you that much.
Oh, good.
I unfortunately don't have an access yet, but we were practicing, are practicing in some months already, but
it's definitely the beta's going for a little bit longer, and obviously late August is when the game is coming. So a lot of people who haven't got beta access are still, dying to get in there, but luckily we're not far away. But Vilius, I'll turn to you. One last quick question for John about Molten Core. What have you got, mate?
Yeah, and I have been playing the beta. The hype is real. We're all super excited, and the 3 months can't go by fast enough. But I wanted to ask you about boss fights real quick, because as a tank, probably one of the most epic things for me was fighting Ragnaros and being punted across the room like a ragdoll. But you mentioned before that your favorite fight in was Baron Geddon. Was that because of the bomb mechanic? And did your level design, like the geometry of the roof, have any impact on that encounter design?
You know what? I can't take any credit at all for the creative use of what we called knockback. The knockback was this because it's an MMO. There's no physics. Okay, there's the gravity is okay. It's a pull down, like all objects pull down until they collide against the collidable surface. It's not true physics. Jeff. Oh gosh, he got the producers. He twisted their arms to finally give him one little mechanic called knockback, and it's like used in every. He was joking at the time. He's like, we got this one little mechanic called knockback, and we're using it in every single fight. It's so crucial. We're so glad we got this. But no, Baron Geddon, I loved it because of that sideways bounce, that 45-degree bounce you could do on the sides of the wall, but completely at the invention of the guys designing the fight. It was just organic. It wasn't organic. It was Scott Mercer coming up with, hey, we can do this, So that was not intended at all. He just looked at the geometry and said, I can do this now. Oh, cool. And, something like that.
Very good. John, I've got one last question for you as we wrap this call up. You already talked about what you would do in Ragnaros' area as, the one thing that you would change if you could go back in time. And I want to expand on that a little bit because at the end of all these calls, I'll be asking you what you would go back and change. And you've already answered that question. But if I were to push you a bit more and say, look, we talked about the amazing feat that you and the team achieved in terms of putting this together in such a short period of time. If I were to give you all the time in the world and you could go back to 2003, 2004, you're designing Molten Core with, no stress. Outside of that Ragnaros area and talking about the other areas, what would you have done?
Oh boy, probably something, boy, this is kind of a boring answer. The ceiling, believe it or not, the ceiling was kind of boring. I actually sculpted a much more, how do I describe it? A much more, it was a very weird ceiling for Ragnaros. I actually did do it. And it was one of the very few times that my geometry was actually deleted and redone by somebody else on the team because they thought it was just too hard to apply textures to. Now, they didn't realize that there's going to be fog in the room and that you wouldn't have noticed that there was texture seams. People, when you're applying 2D textures to the 3D surface, obviously you're going to have some seams. And a lot of people are a lot more fastidious about hiding the seams than other people. So that was probably one of the things that I would have liked to have stayed, but that was certainly not the hill I wanted to die on. I mean, if it was the final room I had, I think the runes are still there. I think, but it was simplified. But I'm really happy with the way the Molten Core looked. I wish we had better technology for lava. Lava was kind of like you couldn't really do a lot with it. Like the props were kind of not flexible. I would like to have some tech that gives me like more believable lava. But I'm kind of happy with it. I actually wouldn't do a whole lot to the Molten Core.
All right. Well, look, John, I'll let you go on this one, but thanks so much, CrazyK, for getting in on this one. And now I can say this. Thank you so much as well to Vilius for doing another one. Thanks, mate.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Josh, and thank you, John.
Thanks for it's good talking to you guys too. I like this forum that we have here. A bunch of people talking. It's kind of cool, reminiscing.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and great talking to you, John and John.
Glad to be here. Glad to talk to you too.
And John, once again, author of The WoW Diary, available now on Amazon at thewowdiary.com as well. Thanks, mate, and we will see you on the next episode as we get through more and more of these dungeons. Thanks so much, mate. You've been a legend.
Thanks a lot again. Bye, guys.
This week on my other podcast, The Cinephiles, we cover 1991's Silence of the Lambs.
Where's the gun? Oh, it's not in his hand. It's close to it. Give him one in the goddamn leg!
Shoot him. But
shoot him!
Give him one in the head. See if he does anything.
See if he responds to that.
Nope, nothing. Didn't talk back.
All right, now.
If you'd like to hear more from the Cinephiles, then please do log on to cinephiles.com. That's SINNERFILES. Or search for the Cinephiles on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. But now, let's get back to Countdown. Hey guys, just before we get into this call, even though during this call you'll actually hear me arguing against the making of these kinds of announcements, I should just say nonetheless that there are full spoilers for Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII in this call if you haven't played those games, so please do consider yourself warned. They're the last two games that we cover in this epic call, so you can still listen to much of it. Let's have a listen. All right, it's time for another Countdown to Classic, very special call with what we call a metric fuck ton of listeners on the line. This is, once again, guys, as you know on the show recently, every now and again we've been branching out a little bit. You know, I am a gamer. I like to talk games outside of WoW Classic as well. I know this is a WoW Classic show, but we can tie it back into WoW Classic, and I want to talk about E3, and we've learnt so much over the last, few days with what's to come in the gaming landscape over the next, 6 to 9 months, and a lot of titles have a lot of people very excited, and we have got 8 people on the line right now to each talk about a title that they are very, very excited about. And I'll introduce them all as we go along. But I'll just shout out the names. Quick hello, everyone. Freelancer, how are you?
Hello.
Kit, what's going on?
I'm doing quite fine.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Lokth.
It's good to be back.
Panophobic.
Happy to be here.
Surnami.
Hi, everybody.
Zetral.
Thanks for having me on the show.
And Stu, my running mate from the Cinephiles, is in on this one.
Good morning.
Okay, guys, I'm very excited to have you all here. Thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time out of your days to do this. But let's start general, guys. E3 It was wild. I haven't been sort of this excited by an E3 for a little while. I'll open this one up to the floor. Well, actually, no, here's what I'll do. Freelancer, I'll start with you. You work in the industry as a game dev. Tell me your general thoughts about this E3 and why it got you rather excited for what's to come.
So what really was interesting about this E3 is that, like, a major thing is that Sony didn't turn up to this E3. So it kind of sent a message throughout the industry that you can kind of delay things and still be relevant. Like, even though that we had like a lot of like new announcements throughout all the other like studios and companies, it was kind of interesting to see that most of those new like announcements was like either remakes or franchises returning, like with a new sequel or title or follow up. It's a different E3 than what we usually have. Usually we have an E3 where it's all like just new announcement after new announcement. This E3 and like the two last E3s, we kind of had more and more remakes and remasters and franchises returning. So we hadn't had a lot of new franchises introduced. So it's, yeah.
I definitely agree with you. And Stu, I actually want to smash cut to you on this one because that's a great point raised by Freelancer, and it's something I've been dying to talk to you about. Obviously, you are fully entrenched in the movie industry. You talk movies all day, every day. You're involved in writing reviews. You obviously do the Cinephiles with me as well. And, you know, people have been criticizing Hollywood recently, you know, of the last few years, saying, fucking hell, get some new ideas, guys. Why is everything a remake? And yeah, this E3, I definitely noticed a lot of remakes coming this way, and people are now sort of starting to perhaps somewhat, you know, some people cock an eye at, raise an eyebrow, I should say, at the gaming industry, going, oh, a lot of old IPs coming back, a lot of remakes and remasters. Don't you guys have any fresh ideas? But generally it seems more accepted within the gaming industry, I think. What do you reckon about that, Hollywood versus gaming, in terms of bringing back old material?
Well, I think what we've always looked at is, like, if you've got an old movie with a cool concept, but you didn't have the technology to do it properly, why not remake it? Like, I think we mainly buck the trend in movies when you remake a classic and everyone says, oh, why did you touch that? Like, it was fine the way it is. If you go back and find a little gem that had a cool idea, and then rework it, I think that people will be more appreciative of that. The thing with games, though, it's like, the thing we wanted when we were like 12 to 16 sort of thing, playing on very simple consoles. Now we've got the graphic capability to do stuff. So it seems probably more accepted because you're getting a better gaming experience than you would have been otherwise on a sort of earlier generation console or PC.
Fair points. Surnami, I might throw it to you, and guys, just jump in from here on after Tsunami's done. We'll turn it into a bit of a free-for-all. Tsunami, I'll throw it to you now, and just, you know, say that, you know, anyone jump in on what Surnami has to say about this, but you were absolutely giddy throughout E3. You were piping up in Discord all the time. You were so excited by a lot of the announcements that were coming out. Obviously, you are a bit of a Nintendo fan, and you'll be touching on that specifically soon. But what were your thoughts on this E3? Were you happy? Were you not happy? How you were just, you know, bouncing off the walls the whole time, it seemed, in the Discord. So how would you think of it all?
I really enjoyed it, but I think it's because there's a lot of nostalgia being kicked up here. Like what you all were saying, there's a lot of remakes going on. And especially on the Nintendo side, there are so many games I can't wait to play again, because I kind of don't remember them because I was a little kid when I played a lot of these. And then there's a couple that I missed because I was just super busy. So I cannot wait for these games.
Okay. And, one last thing there's obviously some games that we're not going to be talking about during this call. You're all here because you've got a specific game that you're really excited about. So just before we get into those specifics, I just want to list the ones that we are talking about, and I want anyone to pipe up about a game that's not on this list that they feel also warrants a bit of quick chat. Now, we're talking about Fallen Order, Doom, Phantasy Star Online 2, Trials of Mana, Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII, and Cyberpunk 2077. Now, there is a lot of other big titles that were announced during E3. Is there anything that wasn't on that list that people go, oh, Josh, I can't believe we're not talking about this one?
Besides Nintendo, of course, because there's a huge list that I'm going to be going into.
Yep, that's all right. We'll definitely get through the Nintendo stuff. Anything outside of Nintendo?
I mean, I'd say like it's worth mentioning that even though Devolver Digital didn't attend like with a like regular press conference at the E3, it's worth mentioning that the actual games they announced in their like wacky own like copy of Nintendo Direct, it's worth mentioning that those games they announced are actually spectacularly like indie games. It's worth checking them out and like having a look at them. But all in all, like I think like the list you already compiled is really, really good.
All right, guys. So just before we get into everything, obviously how we tie this back into relevance with Countdown to Classic is, we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that's not relevant to the show as we pour through what happened at E3. But I want to talk to you guys real quick about how E3 and all the announcements in general will affect your plans for WoW Classic. Now, we all, love to sort of joke about, well, not so much joke, but WoW Classic is life, but we're gamers and we play other games too. So I'm going to open this one up to the field. First in, best dressed. Who is particularly worried that, oh shit, there's too many good titles. What am I going to do with WoW Classic now?
I'm particularly
all in release.
Sorry, go for it. Someone else is going to jump in.
I was just going to say I'm particularly worried, and yes, I do have to play it.
We want to play them all on release.
Yeah, I don't understand this not playing on release thing. That's strange. What sort of weirdo thing is that? You got to buy it the day it comes out.
That's me. I still haven't played God of War. I'm probably going to grab it in the next couple of weeks and play it soon.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to pay $100 for that. I'll wait.
Does this
So this is why the Switch is more superior, is because I can play it anywhere. I can take it to work with me. I can sneak it into the bathroom and play.
It's definitely something that's changed my plans. I can tell you that much, guys. Like I, obviously will be playing the shit out of WoW Classic, but it's also the fact that WoW Classic isn't going anywhere. It's a slow burn. You will be leveling your character and raiding with your character and doing what you will with your character over, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever.
No, I'm going to level my character in like 3 weeks.
But then would you be one of those people who, when a new game comes out, you just not play WoW Classic for 10 days while you go through that game and then just come back to it? Or would you just go through, an hour here and there with WoW Classic?
It depends how obsessed I am with WoW Classic at the time. Like, I very much used to go through phases when I'd play WoW. Like I'd, 6 months, no life it, and WoW was everything and my be all and end all of games. While, other portions of my life, I was able to balance WoW and other games at the same time. And then there are periods where I just didn't play WoW at all, and I'd, spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on other video games and realize, Jesus, this is expensive, and go back to WoW.
I can tell you guys that a small part of me was more like, it's funny because I'm more like pissed off, going like, fuck, all these amazing games demanding my attention, and I really want to play like 7 or 8 of them, like a fair bit. And it's great that we're getting these amazing games, but also like I want to play WoW Classic and they've got these things pulling me away from it. But I wonder if anyone else sort of felt the same way.
Yeah, so the good news for me is that Final Fantasy VII comes out in March, which I'm anticipating will be right around the time sort of BWL's on farm or AQ is like in progression mode. So I might just have to duck out a few of those raids and just play Final Fantasy for a couple weeks, get that over with, and just be like, oh guys, I'm sick. I can't make the raid tonight. That kind of play.
Send this to his GM.
Very good.
I would have to say I'm very much a one-trick pony. Always have been with games. So it does worry me a little bit. Like I played WoW and just played WoW and played so much WoW and it was ridiculous. And before that I played City of Heroes and just played City of Heroes. And I'm the same with every game. And I've jumped through a couple of different MMOs and nothing's really held. So I do worry about that. Not so much for Final Fantasy VIII. I will play it until I finish it, but it really isn't that long a game. But for Cyberpunk 2077, I'm afraid that I probably won't touch WoW for, 3 months or something.
Yeah, well, most of my friends are that way. I'm expecting all of them to only care about WoW. So, if my close friends are online, it's going to be WoW. And if they're not, I'll probably steal away for a couple hours and play whatever the new release is.
I get moved I'll get in moods where I want to play like an MMO for a while. I'll play and grind and WoW for a couple hours. Then I just like start falling asleep. But if I load up like a shooter, like Overwatch or something, revives me right back up, I think that's going to be where Doom fits in for me.
All right, guys. Well, we might as well get straight into it. And as I said, each one of you has approached me with a game that you are incredibly excited about. And these were really the highlights of E3. Now, not to shit on the other games. I'm sure there's a lot of other games that people were very, very excited about. I know there's one or two big ones that I'm forgetting that you guys will be losing your minds over. But these are, we can't have the call sort of go on for hours on end. So we've just had to select these ones. And Stu, I'm going to start with you, because we've been talking about this one around the office, and we are very, very excited for Star Wars and what's to come with Fallen Order. So why don't you talk to us about what you saw in that trailer and the gameplay footage that has you so excited?
I think for the most part with these games is that it doesn't really matter now that this could be basically a reskinned version of, say, Red Dead Redemption, and we'd be happy. Like the line between Fallen Order or Horizon Zero Dawn or The Witcher, for me, they're all just big worlds to play in, and either you get nostalgic for the world that you're playing in or you don't. So you either want to go be a cowboy, or you want to go take down metal dinosaurs, or you want to be in a medieval skin, or for me, it's just that sort of fan immersion of wanting to play in a Star Wars world. And for me, it hit that. It looks cool. I mean, I'm not a big fan. Some of the character designs were a bit average, but if I'm going to be put in a situation where some John Williams music kicks up and I get a lightsaber in my hand and I'm taking down stormtroopers, hey man, I'm in. I'm in for sure. I think it looked cool. I like the mechanics of sort of the Force abilities, the different combat, and also look like you got the little droid on your back that was reminiscent of the Battlefront 2, or was it Battlefield or Battlefront 2? I always get them
Battlefront
confused. Yeah, which you had for the campaign mode. You had the little Imperial female protagonist that you were playing as, and she had that same sort of little droid on her back. So I'm in. I think it looks all right. And we haven't even seen sort of...
Sorry.
No, you go.
Has there been any hints, or has it been revealed anything if this is related to like the old Dark Forces storyline, or is that completely scrapped?
I'm not sure. I haven't sort of delved deep in that. I know on the timeline it's meant to be taking place after Order 66, and that's where you're like the young Jedi that didn't get cleaned up in the mess.
Yeah, he was the youngling in the can when the order went out.
Yeah. You're like, and no one thought to check your name off the list because you're probably not that good. But the funny thing is, this follows on. So it's a couple of years, obviously, after Revenge of the Sith. This is the same grounds that Disney's Rebels played in, where it was that there was a Last Jedi sort of thing, putting together a little bit of his team. So it'd be interesting to see like what you've got around that time in terms of villains. The Emperor's still there, Darth Vader's still there, Darth Maul's still about, and we haven't heard if they're going to take part in this game at all as the overall sort of antagonist. And also that puts Yoda and Obi-Wan still in play, whether or not you'll at any stage come in contact with them. But it's a fertile grounds to play with in terms of for Star Wars fans.
Now, Stu, you have been screaming for a while about this, and it seems to be all you've ever wanted, as you say, talking about just reskinning things, is you were like, just give me Uncharted in the Star Wars universe. How hard is that to do? Do you think this is that game?
I don't think so. From the looks of things, it doesn't seem to be that kind of forward momentum of something like an Uncharted. Like Uncharted for me always feels like there's a countdown going and you're always running, you're always sort of behind the clock, which I love about it. But then also with this, I do enjoy that it's a walled off experience similar to God of War, where you're not going to spend forever looking for things and chasing down side quests. You seem to more have a linear story that'll just unfold in front of you. So in that sense, I guess maybe it is a bit more like Uncharted.
Yeah, and obviously they've also hit the prerequisite in the marketing department, as you said, to have, the world's cutest droid somehow along as a sidekick.
Yeah, and which works because, I mean, you've got to have something. Like if you're not going to have a little sidekick or something like we saw in God of War or Uncharted, obviously you've got people to bounce off for the narrative. But I think you need something, and you need a reason that he can get round all these into all these different security places and whatnot. But no, I'm excited. I think the concept's pretty cool. I think a Star Wars, like I've always said, a Star Wars game should be a bit of a no-brainer at this point. And the fact that we keep sort of screwing it up, or not, like how many games has EA released since they've had the rights to Star Wars?
Yeah, and obviously there's been a lot of criticisms coming their way over what they've done with the property.
And they've had it for what, nearly 5 years? I think they almost took it. Was it either 2012 or 2013? Whereas you see the content that Lucas Arts used to put out. I mean, not all of them were great, but at least there was a bit more of a steady stream of content.
Hey, Star Wars Connect will always be the best Star Wars game.
Exactly.
Well, now, Lokth, I'm glad you piped up, because you were someone who said that you weren't particularly excited for this game. Now, I've got my own hesitant. I'm very, very excited for Fallen Order, but I do have a bit of hesitancy behind that because, again, you know, EA is involved in some way, and it's got a bit of that, like, I don't know, something in the art style. There's a bit of that EA gloss that pulls it back a bit for me. And Lokth, so I'll turn to you and just say, you wanted to retort a bit and say you don't think this one's really that exciting. Tell me why.
I'm a big fan of the old Star Wars games, and after watching the trailer for this one, it really feels like it's just trying to play this really safe middle ground where it doesn't really tend to try and do much different to any other game that's come before it. And graphically, it's not terribly impressive for a game being released in 2019, 2020. They can't even get lightsabers right. Like, seriously, how hard is it to get a lightsaber to look like a lightsaber? Like, these things look like blue lasers as compared to an actual lightsaber in the Star Wars universe. But like,
as compared to a laser sword.
Yeah. It looks it looks like, no. Have a look at a lightsaber from something, say, The Force Unleashed, compared to what we have in Fallen Order. And I don't think it's that good. It really just doesn't look that nice to me. And, you know, after watching the gameplay trailer again for this call, it's just like the combat feels a bit slow and sluggish compared to, you know, in other Star Wars games. Like, have a look at games like Force Unleashed, where you're a literal god, where you're a bit overpowered, or you go back even further in the timeline to the Dark Forces games with Jedi Knight 2 and Jedi Academy, where you have some of the greatest combat, I'd argue, ever put into a video game. And it really just feels like a step down. Like, you really need to put a lot of work into getting a Star Wars game right, because there's been so many great things that have come before it. And I just don't see that from the gameplay that we've seen so far from Fallen Order.
Now, a few of those games, the previous Star Wars titles that you list, are ones that I've been talking about with our other co-host of the Cinephiles, Liam, who is a huge fan of Star Wars video games. And some of those ones that you just mentioned, he just, you know, you should see the almost, you know, the climax that he goes through when he starts talking about through those games. It's going, oh my God, the combat in the old Star Wars titles, some of them are amazing. But Stu, do you have anything?
Understandably.
Yeah. Stu, do you have anything in reply to that Lokth has said, or do you think they're fair criticisms?
No, I think it's fair. I think we've hit a place now in gaming where are we at peak graphic capability where we're not wowed by stuff? Like, I mean, how, and maybe it'll just wait till we step up to next generation consoles next year. But I'm not sure if I sometimes care what things look like if it can give me the vibe that I'm in that world. So
I agree with that, but my issue is the fact that I think things like Force Unleashed look better.
Yeah.
Force Unleashed looks more like a Star Wars game than what Fallen Order does to me.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. It's very much like Star Wars itself. Like, there are some people that found like that Rogue One felt more like Star Wars than The Force Awakens, for instance. And it can be such a simple little thing. And maybe it's the same with this game where you look at it and you're like, something, I'm just not it's not got that Star Wars flavor or that essence. But, you know, I think we'll all probably still play it. And I think, you know, it's worth reserving further judgment till we get to see a bit more of it. But I don't know, beggars can't be choosers, I guess, in terms of Star Wars content for gaming at the moment.
Yeah, and as long as EA holds the license as well, we can't really do much with it. But
have either of you guys played Titanfall 2?
No, I haven't.
Which is that was the last one that this studio put out, wasn't it?
Well, they also, I mean, they're the same. Isn't that the same crew that did Apex Legends?
It's Respawn.
It's Respawn. So it's Apex, it's Titanfall, but more importantly, it's the original Infinity Ward, which is Call of Duty 4.
Very good.
Thanks,
All
man.
right, I'm going back to my hangover.
Okay, and with that, we might turn to the next game. And Freelancer, I wanted to give you your chance because you wanted to talk about a game that could arguably be said to be the number one title from what we saw at E3, one that people are very, very excited for, and that was Cyberpunk 2077. Why don't you tell me about how you felt about what you saw from Cyberpunk 2077 at E3?
So what they showed this time was more like a in-depth view of the story, where they decided to show the male character of this story, because in Cyberpunk 2077 you can choose if you want to play as the female or the male character, and up until now they only showed the female character. This time they showed the male character, and even more so they showed a reworked male character compared to all the other previews they showed of that character. What really makes this absolutely amazing compared to other games shown this year is the immense, the vast scale of this game, everything about it, the actual world itself, the things you can do in the world, how dynamic it is, everything about it. And then they also just bump it up by pulling in Keanu Reeves, just completely out of left field. No one expected that. More so, they revealed in an interview with the CEO of CD Projekt Red that they had Keanu over for more than 50 days at the studio to do voice recording. So that kind of tells you a bit about how involved that character is with the story. They've said that this is not just a side character. This is actually he's gonna be one of the main characters in the story.
Oh, that's great to know. I didn't actually realize that, because one of the pessimistic thoughts that I had was, this is a bit of, stunt casting, and they've just got him in for a day to record and blah, blah, blah. But that was obviously, arguably the moment of the E3 when Keanu Reeves comes out on stage, and we now have the meme going around of "You're breathtaking," which was a fantastic moment. But, tell me what you think about, obviously coming from CD Projekt Red, we've got all the expectations that come from the grand success of, the Witcher series, and obviously The Witcher 3 being the last title that people are familiar with. Everyone loves that. Very few people I run into have negative things to say about The Witcher 3. Do you think we're basically getting The Witcher 3 sci-fi, or this is obviously a drastically differently looking game?
I mean, it's a valid concern, really, because every other thing we've seen from CD Projekt Red has been medieval. It's been Witcher 1, 2, and 3. So finally getting to see them doing something completely different, not only just the style and the universe, but also the actual gameplay and how, something as simple as how the camera is. Because anything that CD Projekt Red has done up until this point has been in third-person view. Now we are getting a first-person view, so we see it from inside the character. And many people have raised concerns about if CD Projekt Red is able to pull this off. They haven't shown anything how they are actually able to do this up until just small trailers. But a really good point of why they need to do it as a first person thing compared to what they did with Witcher 3 is in Witcher 3 you have a lot of outdoors environments, so you can move the camera around freely without having it to bump into interior environment. Whereas in Cyberpunk, a lot of the gameplay is going to happen inside buildings, inside complexes. So you're going to have a lot of interior shots. And if you have a third-person camera, you're only going to have issues with the camera bumping into walls and ceilings. That's what Rocksteady did kind of try to solve in their Batman games, where you'll see that when you play the Batman games by Rocksteady, that all the doors are 3 times the size of Batman himself, only to accompany like the camera going through the wall with him. So they kind of don't have to rework the world just to fit the camera. They can build the world so it fits like with the universe and with the aesthetic and the theme. So you really feel like you're inside the world instead of it being like a game world.
Now, as a game dev yourself, and if you're happy to talk about, briefly what it is that you do, playing games through the eyes of someone who works in the industry, is there anything that you picked up on in The Witcher 3 that you wished CD Projekt Red had changed and might change or consider changing for Cyberpunk 2077?
That's a very good question. So yeah, sure. Yeah, let's just go back a bit. I've worked in games for 9 years now, professionally. And lately I've even worked with people that worked on Cyberpunk 2077. One of our sound engineers worked at them for a couple of months before his wife got pregnant and he has to move back to Denmark. And that's when we hired him. But yeah, if we look at what they did with Witcher 3 and what they could change to accompany Cyberpunk, I would say it would be something about maybe going more in depth with the world instead of just sticking to the story. I'd say I think one of the main things about Witcher 3 that a lot of people miss out on is how amazing the side quests are. The story is quite good, but the side quests themselves are quite something compared to other games where, if you look at just other RPG games, even just World of Warcraft, side quests in World of Warcraft are not as amazing as main quest lines where you feel like you carry the story forward and you progress through the world. They are really, really good at making side quests a really valuable story in themselves. So I really hope they change that from Witcher 3 to Cyberpunk. They go even more in depth with side quests, because that kind of sets the world apart. It makes it more human, more alive, more. It really gives small characters value.
Now, my last question for you would be, we're all excited about World of Warcraft Classic coming. Now I appreciate that Cyberpunk isn't due, I believe, until April of next year. So you'd get a bit of time for WoW Classic under your belt. But how is Cyberpunk's release going to affect your plans for WoW Classic?
Yeah. So yeah, we are pretty lucky with Cyberpunk being that much away from the release of Classic WoW. I'm going to play Classic WoW a ton. That's for sure. So I don't think it's going to impact my experience too much. I'm going to probably play casually in Classic, so not that much of an issue. I'd say if I was more of a hardcore raider, it probably would impact. So I'm kind of lucky there. So for me, it's all good.
Okay. Did anyone else have any real quick points on Cyberpunk that we haven't heard yet?
The Keanu Reeves thing at the start there, I've seen a couple of little things saying that there's a chance he's going to be a little bit like the Joker in Arkham Knight, so maybe not really there, but there in your head. I don't know if that's confirmed, but I've seen a few things drop about that, and I don't know if that's good or bad.
All right.
So I actually have some inside information on that. I can confirm that he is a actual main character, not main character, but he is an actual character in the world. So he's not, yeah.
All right, so there you go. Theory debunked.
Yeah.
Very good, guys. Well, look, we might move on to the next game. And Surnami, I'm going to pass the football over to you because you were not necessarily excited for one title in particular. You were very excited over one particular company, and that was the presentation that just blew everyone away. And I thought this company can walk away from E3 with their heads held the highest, and that was Nintendo. Wow, talk about the comeback of Nintendo and peak Nintendo right now. Surnami, tell us about how you felt about what happened at E3 with them.
Oh, where to start? Okay, so first off, they announced 2 Smash characters. So they did the hero or the luminary from Dragon Quest is going to be the first one to drop in summer, which I I really love Smash Brothers. I have a lot of fun with it. And they also announced the Banjo-Kazooie, which if you guys saw the trailer for that, it was just priceless. They try to fake you out, and then they come out. Like, I watched some like live reactions of it, and people were going crazy for it. But on top of that, I have a list. So first off, in July, we have the new Fire Emblem. And then in August, we have Astral Chain. And then in September, this is where it gets a little sketchy because we have WoW coming out, but we have Link's Awakening. And then I know this wasn't big on the list, but it's big for me, is Ni no Kuni. And then you have Dragon Quest XI. And then you have Pokemon Sword and Shield. And then you have Resident Evil 5. I don't really care about 6 too much. Luigi's Mansion. The Witcher 3, which I know didn't look that great, but come on. Portable The Witcher 3. I just can't wait to play that on my lunch breaks. And then we have Crystal Chronicles. We have Panzer Dragoon. Trials of Mana, which is coming out next year. The 3D version. And my favorite was Animal Crossing. That one made me freak out the most.
All right, tell us why, because I think one of the callers on this line wasn't particularly excited for Animal Crossing. I'm not an Animal Crossing guy myself, but I'd love to hear why it's such a huge series that captivates people like yourself.
Okay, so the first time I played this, I think I was fresh out of high school, the first one that came out on GameCube, and I played that game for hours. And then I think we had another, what was the last console one, I think came out in 2008. So it's been 11 years since we had a console Animal Crossing. It's just been so long. It's overdue. It looks great. It looks like you can decorate outside along with the inside. You start out on a deserted island, and
you can make your own fire festival.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about Animal Crossing. It's cute. It's fun. You could also have 8 people. It looks like you're going to be able to have 8 visitors like online too. So I really can't wait.
All right. Well, I mean, one thing I think we should mention as well is, the one thing that I'd be most excited. I mean, I really, really love some of these titles, like Luigi's Mansion. I'm very excited for. But the big one, I guess, that even though it seems like it's very much so perhaps early in development, Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, like Surnami. How do you feel about that one?
Okay. I meant to leave that for last. And, but it isn't going to affect WoW because I think, they just announced it, but I think it's probably a couple years off. I was not expecting that. I was thinking like they were going to do probably like a Metroid Prime or something like that kind of announcement. But to see that, my jaw dropped. I didn't even know what to say. I was like, already? Like, I was expecting maybe some DLC or something, but not a whole nother game.
Yeah, I was shocked that they announced it this year as opposed to going the route of, announcing it next year, maybe with a light amount of very early gameplay. I don't know if they'd have it ready by then, but yeah, sure, we got a little bit of a light trailer. That's great. But as I said, I get the impression that this is a couple of years away. So, I just find it interesting that they announced it now as opposed to, a little bit closer to when it's more ready. But anyway, it's great to know that there is a sequel coming out. And I should ask, obviously, a lot of people, I thought Breath of the Wild was arguably the game of the year when it came out. Is anyone else particularly excited about Breath of the Wild 2 coming out and ready to do that all over again?
I am 1,000% excited for Breath of the Wild 2. I lost, a good 3-4 weeks of my life after the first Breath of the Wild when I bought my Switch. So I'm hoping that the exact same thing happens again, and I'll just have to somehow fit WoW into that time period as well. So it's going to be amazing juggling act of time spending in the worlds of Azeroth, but more importantly, during that time period, Hyrule.
Well, Surnami, I'll finish up on the Nintendo line with this. Just saying, you've got a number of titles there that you're pumped up by. Everyone else on this call just kind of has, 1 or 2 maybe that they're really pumped for that they're going to talk about. But you have, numerous issues with WoW Classic and these games dividing your attention. How are you going to deal with that?
I really am not sure, but thankfully, it is a portable console, so I can take it on my lunch breaks. Originally, my plan was I'm going to take my laptop to work and fish or do crafting and WoW. But now I'm kind of like, I don't know, because I really want to play Dragon Quest XI because I was buying my house when it originally came out, so I did not get to play that, and I've been playing Dragon Quest games since Dragon Warrior, which was the first one that came out in America. And that comes out on the 27th, which I think is at around the day after. So I'm kind of worried about that a little bit. And then Pokemon too, but I think I'm just going to have to take it and play it during my lunch breaks. And because I think WoW is probably still going to come first for me.
All right, let's turn to you, Panophobic, because you want to talk to us about Doom Eternal, another one that got a lot of people very, very excited. Now, I like Doom, I really do, but I've not been too caught up by it in the past. I bought the last title, which I really, really enjoyed. I thought it was very slick. Obviously, it came out to, great critical acclaim and was very, very popular amongst gamers, but tell us why. Here's the one thing I've got questioning here. When I watch this trailer for Doom Eternal, I don't feel a big difference between this and the last title outside of, maybe we'll get you to talk about the Dark Souls mode as well. But tell me why you're so pumped for Doom and what you feel it's going to do to expand that series.
Well, I'm initially pumped just because they did such a damn good job with the first one. It's in this age of, like you guys talk about how everything's getting rehashed, redone over again, and the rate of success with that is not that great. A lot of these remakes aren't that quality, but Doom was a great example of that. So I'm excited for more of the same. That's the initial. And the other one biggest thing for this Doom Eternal is honestly the Dark Souls mode, the invasion mode. That's why I'm kind of sad they didn't talk about it too much this E3, but that's huge to me.
Did you participate in that Dark Souls invasion thing a lot when you could do it, obviously, in that game?
Not in the invasion part of it too much. I actually enjoyed the co-op aspect of it a lot more, but I think in obviously the context of Doom and what they can do with it being like a demon and even being like one of the boss demons, that's it just opens up so many possibilities.
Now, you've got quite the history with the Doom franchise, don't you?
Somewhat. I didn't play Doom 2 a whole lot. I was really young when it was at its most popular time. I think it was in 4th, 5th grade, something like that. I wouldn't able to before the game. I actually played the shareware for 2-3 years straight. But I did play other ones like Doom 64. I think I bought a new PC for the sole purpose of playing Doom 3, and I enjoyed it to everybody's chagrin. That really didn't like it, the flashlight mode, everything. But no, I've just been a longtime fan. It's just been a dear franchise to my heart.
I definitely remember my time with Doom 2, and Doom 2 was the first online game that I played. I very, very vividly remember, connecting, the early iterations of dial-up modems, my computer to play with a friend, just some one-on-one, death matches we'd play in Doom 2. We'd go I think we'd do, there was one map that we'd always run over and over again. I loved Doom 2, but never really kept with the series much after that. But is there something that you feel you've seen in the trailer for this particular title that you feel people will come to love? Or do you just think, as you say, it's more so rather than being any kind of reinvigoration of the franchise that was done last time, this one is just more of a fleshing out upon that, invigoration, if you will?
I think they're opening up a lot. I'm torn on the fact that they're not going to have a traditional deathmatch mode. I heard. I think the battle mode is really interesting. There's a lot of questions there, but again, it seems like they're trying a whole lot, with everything. What is it? Marty Stratton said, "We're not just making a Doom game; we're building a Doom universe." So I definitely think that's what their intent is. They really want to open this up and make it a big, huge, huge world.
All right, and how is this one going to affect your playtime with WoW Classic?
It's hard because I got 3 months until it comes out. So I don't know. Gotta ask my wife maybe. But no, it's mostly just managing the family time with it.
All right, fair enough.
Can I just ask quickly?
Go for it.
Like how Pan, how's your feeling on like the fact that they kind of got rid of the fact that you can now mod that you can't mod Doom like you could with the old Doom games. It kind of takes away like the whole freshness of getting new levels from community members and mods and all that jazz.
Unfortunately, I don't have a big stance on that. I was never really a part of the modding community or anything. I was really young when the games first came out, and by the time when all the modding was around, I think I was just distracted on other. I was just more so just about the core games themselves, the single player. I never even got to touch the multiplayer on Doom 2 or anything.
Now, mate, is there anything else that we haven't mentioned about Doom Eternal that you're really psyched for as well to see in the series? Well,
like I said, the invasion mode, I would like to hear a bit more about that. Something that's been a little bit controversial, people have been complaining about the aesthetic on the monster designs. They've changed a few and all that. I'm kind of like how you are with WoW Classic. However they do it, I'm going to love it. And I'm a little more liberal with that. I don't know. It still feels like... on top of that, I thought a really cool thing is the destructible monsters, where the flesh and the metal and the armor it decays and like it's affected by you attacking it progressively. It's such a subtle but awesome thing about a game. It's kind of something I've always wanted to see in gaming. It's nice to see that come to life. Just all the new additions of the weapons, the shoulder mounted gun, the grappling hook, the arm blade. The sword, the crucible sword, I think it's called. They just seem to have the right touch, right flavor, and everything. It really kind of makes you feel amped up about Doom like you did back in the day.
All right, guys, let's move on to the next title. And Zetral, I'll get you to tee up some chat about another MMO, which is an interesting one that people were not expecting. Sega obviously came out and announced, hey, everyone, after all these years, Phantasy Star Online 2. And that blew people's minds. Now, granted, this is an older game. This has been available for years in Japan. It just never got the Western release that people were craving, and Sega has finally caved and said, all right, we'll give it to you. So it's interesting to get another MMO coming out for free, I should add, around about the time that WoW Classic's going to be available. So people who love MMOs might be a little bit torn over this. Who knows? Now, I can tell you that I have... everyone's got gaming regrets. I regret not getting into Phantasy Star Online, the original, all those years ago, because I see all the love and affection that it gets talked about to this day, from gamers. And I think I would have probably really enjoyed that title. So I'm more than happy to check out Phantasy Star Online too, and I will be. Tell me why this title got you so excited, and what your history is with the franchise, Zetral.
Well, honestly, it has part to do with just the game and like being brought into this community, but like my friends wouldn't know anything about Phantasy Star unless I told them about it. It's really not super mainstream like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and whatnot. But it used to be the big three back in the 90s when all the JRPGs were just coming up. So it's pretty exciting to finally be getting a lot of this stuff localized in the States. And also to clarify, they haven't said that they're localizing it in Europe yet. So it looks like it's just coming to North America right now until they say something else. But it's really exciting in hand with all the Dragon Quest stuff that's coming out too, that they're finally pushing all these JRPGs besides Final Fantasy out to the Western countries, which is a huge shift in mentality because they're enormous over there. Like PlayStation, Phantasy Star Online 2 came out in 2012, so it's been out for 7 years now, and they've had an English patch for it. They've had modding communities that have tried to localize it themselves and like get connected through the Taiwanese servers whenever they dropped the IP blocks and all that kind of stuff. And people have been clamoring for these things, and they just haven't put in the effort. They've been promising it for, probably 5+ years now. I think in 2014, they said it was coming soon in quotation marks. And now they finally actually announced it. So I'll believe it when I see it, actually.
Fair enough. Now, it's something that I've not personally done, but I know a lot of hardcore, well, not even hardcore, just a lot of MMO players have done themselves in terms of juggling two MMOs. Now, with everything going on with me, I struggle to, as you guys know, the joke is Josh struggles to play one MMO, let alone two. How do you feel about if Phantasy Star Online 2, comes out when they say it's coming out and it takes off in a certain way and you find yourself really enjoying it? How are you going to feel about juggling your time with that MMO, which takes up so much time, with another game like WoW Classic, which obviously demands just as much, if not more time?
It's actually an interesting thing you bring up because it's structured fairly differently than WoW is. Whereas in vanilla WoW, like you have this giant world that everybody's constantly interacting with all the time, and there's numerous opportunities to sit there and grind for things and play economies and all that kind of stuff. Phantasy Star, I don't really think it like pushes that to the forefront. Phantasy Star, I'd say, is kind of like a hybrid between an actual MMO like WoW and an instanced multiplayer game like Monster Hunter. So it's it's like a little blend. So there's a lot of event based things that happen in Phantasy Star that are the main focus of the game, where they'll have tie-ins from other franchises where, for this week, there's a special quest and you can get this cool shoulder pad that makes you look like, Cloud Strife or something like that, just for example. So it's really cool because you can eat Phantasy Star in like little bites just based on like the different events and quests that come out. Obviously, there's like the main chunk of the game where you're leveling and doing bosses and all that kind of stuff, which is really fun. But once you kind of get established in the game, I don't feel like it demands a whole lot of you the way that WoW does. So they're probably a little easy to play together.
Now, for people who aren't familiar with the Phantasy Star Online series, or perhaps particularly Phantasy Star Online 2, what you do know of it, what do you think might be a hook for WoW players who know nothing of the series? If you were to titillate someone, say, hey, come on over and play Phantasy Star Online 2 with me, and they'll be like, well, I'm a WoW gamer, it looks so different. What would you say to them that might, actually interest them to try out that they can't have in WoW?
I think that if you like WoW and traditional RPGs, like turn-based RPGs, it gets you a fix of both. The combat, while it's changed a little bit in Phantasy Star 2, where it's a little more action-y like Monster Hunter, but it's still much more slow-paced and methodical, where it's almost a hybrid between a action RPG and a turn-based RPG, because you have like combos that you get locked into. Once you start attacking, it kind of slows you down a little bit, and you actually have to time your button presses in Phantasy Star. And it's a really cool blend of a real true JRPG with an MMO at the same time. So it kind of scratches two itches at once. So if you're kind of if you're addicted to MMOs, like WoW is your only game, but you also like playing JRPGs like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or something like that, Phantasy Star is a really cool blend of those two games that you could get really excited about.
All right. Now, is anyone else on the call excited to try Phantasy Star Online 2? Like who's, familiar with the series, or anyone who didn't know anything about it and is like, oh, fuck, I'm going to run that as my second MMO?
I definitely want to try it out because I remember my friends having it on the Dreamcast, but I never had a good enough internet connection because it was all dial up back then. But I never had a good enough connection to play, and so I can't wait to try it out. I really like the traditional RPGs and whatnot, so this seems like it's going to be right up my.
All right, fantastic. Now, look, guys, let's get to the next title we want to talk about. I want to go through one that I am very, very, very excited about. One that is actually available now, but another iteration of it is coming in 2020. And Lokth, let's have you talk about Trials of Mana. Now, I am a huge Secret of Mana fan, the second entry in the series. I've played what they now call Trials of Mana before through, nefarious means and unofficial English patches and whatnot, and I love that title as well, but I'm really looking forward to playing an official version of it, and I haven't had the time to sit down with it yet, but I absolutely will be soon. But there's also a remake coming as well. So Lokth, why are you so excited about this announcement that we got with Trials of Mana and the Mana collection in general, perhaps?
Because it's a classic SNES JRPG being released for the first time in the West. And this is one of the best games that I think I've ever played back in the day. I was a massive JRPG fan when I was a kid. I still have pretty much every Japanese RPG that was released in Australia on Super Nintendo sitting behind me on a shelf. And Secret of Mana 2 was when I stumbled across that in probably about the year 2000 online. I think I played it about 30 or 40 times. It is an amazingly good game, and I am looking forward to actually downloading it and probably playing it again today, because I can't play beta today because they're doing AV weekend and I don't care that much for that. So for those who don't know, Secret of Mana 2 or Trials of Mana or Seiken Densetsu 3, because, you've got to give a game 3 different names just to really, make sure everyone knows what it is an amazing addition to the Mana series. And for its time, it's one of the most innovative games I think I've ever played. The game starts off, you get to choose a party of 3. You get to choose your main character out of 6 different main characters. And those choices that you make at the start of the game actually affect the entirety of the story of the game as you play through it, which is an amazing achievement for a game that came out in 1995. Literally, the final boss of the game changes based around who you pick at the start of the game, which I think is, an awesome and unique experience. There's an awesome class system in there where as your characters grow stronger, you actually get to go down different subclasses. Like your standard warrior fellow can become a paladin, or he can become something like a dark knight and so forth, depending on, choices and paths you choose in the game, which is, I think, one of the greatest, examples of, early RPGs, that, early stuff we see now in games like The Witcher and even Warcraft, set up in a, RPG done in 95, which, I can't wait. I'm going to go download it as soon as this call is over, basically.
All right. Well, let me press you a little bit. So if you've played through it a few times before, a little bit like me, who do you normally pick? I'm a Hawkeye or a Kevin guy myself. I love always having those guys with me.
I'm team Dude. Duran, Hawkeye, and Kevin are my favorite 3.
Oh, okay. I usually went Angela, Hawkeye, and Kevin, but it's a fun game, and I really do recommend it to people, particularly if you haven't checked it out before. It's really good with the as Lokth says, the old school. Well, not really. It's okay. I mean, it's a JRPG, but it's an action RPG at the same time as well, I guess. It's a bit of a blend.
I'm going to presume a lot of people who, if they've had a SNES, have played the original Secret of Mana. And that game was all about collecting weapons, leveling up the weapons, and getting cool abilities. In this one, it's all about the characters, and each character has, their own special abilities and combos that you can unlock in an action setting. So they play similar, but the way Mana 2 does it is that as you attack enemies, you build up your combo bar, and then you can unleash a, short combo early on. But as the game progresses and you power up your character, you can unlock these stronger and larger combos until you're doing, action RPG, full screen attacks. And it's one of the most visually impressive games released in the Super Nintendo era. And honestly, I'm amazed it never did get localized until now, almost 25 years later.
Let me ask you, because this is the one thing that I'm now wrestling with. Obviously, we've got, the collection was released on the day of the announcement. People were like, holy shit, I can buy it right now. And they dived right into it, and that's great. And as I said, I'll be firing it up myself, as soon as I get a spare moment this weekend. But it's also something where if you're buying it for Trials of Mana, you're effectively, well, not being asked, but you now got the option to play the same game twice within, 6 months of each other. Even though, yes, one is a remake, but you can play the old school version now, which is what a lot of people are excited to play. And also you've got this 3D remake coming in the same vein that they remade Secret of Mana, which was a bit of a debacle, about, 6 to 12 months ago. Are you going to play both? Are you going to pick one? I mean, I'm really excited to check out the remake, but I'm a bit like, going through the story twice within 6 months. I mean, I guess I'll do it, but sure.
Well, so that's a great thing about, Trials of Mana. You can just pick a different character and get a different story, somewhat. And that's always a, great little thing about that game. I'm probably going to play both, but I did end up purchasing the Secret of Mana remake, and I wasn't too impressed by that. So I hope that they've learned from their lessons there, and the Trials of Mana remake is a bit stronger.
All right, guys. Well, let's get to, the final title or titles that I want to discuss. And we saved the best for last as far as I'm concerned. And we've got Kit and BlokkaRoach here to talk, about Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII. Now, I'm a huge Final Fantasy guy. If people aren't aware, I am absolutely infatuated with that series. I think it's amazing. It's basically what, not what got me into gaming, but definitely what sort of hooked me massively as a young one. Now, Kit, I'll start with you. I have been, trust me, we were close to getting Countdown to Final Fantasy VII Remake at one stage. I have been watching this game like a hawk. I can't wait until we get it. This was finally the moment where we got a lot of the footage we've been dying to see. What did you make of it all?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't start by talking about Final Fantasy VII, by talking about just how historic it was of a game when it came out first. When you looking back at the birth of AAA games, like Final Fantasy VII was the first AAA game and had a budget of $45 million in 97, which is like $70 million today. In comparison, the original Diablo, which came out a month earlier, had a budget of like $1 million. Right. So like this was like unprecedented at the time. And then you go look at the previous Final Fantasy entries, they coming out about every 12 to 18 months, starting from 87 to 94. This game was in development for over 3 years. And as another historical impact, it was basically the reason for the Nintendo Squaresoft split, right? Squaresoft said, we've got big designs for this game. Nintendo says, well, you got to put it on a cartridge. And they said, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to go with Sony. And so like just from a historical perspective, this is a massive game. And then you get into the game itself, which was iconic in all sorts of ways. And so when they're bringing that back now with the shiny new graphics and the epic cutscenes, and they're saying, okay, everything is playable, everything moves around. It's just like, you're just like, oh my God, right? You're the kid again back there in Midgar, zooming out on the city and going, holy shit, right? Like it really just brings you in and you're like, okay, I'm ready. Take my money. Like, what do you want to do? Right. So that's where we are after this E3 release. And so there's like a lot of concerns about some things. And I've got some cons as well. But, you're looking at this from a pure Final Fantasy fanboy perspective. And you're just like, yes, please give it to me now. And that's one of the biggest cons that I have coming into it is like, it's not here now. And I don't have it ready to play. And now you're telling me that it's like, maybe it's only the Midgar part for it. And you're going to make me wait till like the PS6 comes out before I can finish the game. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. It looks amazing, right?
Absolutely.
Well, you mentioned the size of the old one being like on several discs, and they couldn't put that on cartridges. They even mentioned with like this version that it's going to take up 2 Blu-rays, if not more.
And I'm very excited by that. I think that shows that as suggested in the past, the history of the game, they weren't fucking around back then and they're not fucking around now. They're like, we're taking this seriously. This is an event. We are bringing the heat, which is amazing.
Trust Sony to be the people that, break their own technology with being the first company to need to use 2 Blu-rays for their damn game.
Yeah.
I want to touch on, obviously, here's the big one with this one. It's a remake, but it's not the same gameplay. And Kit, I want to just get your thoughts on, have you reconciled with, or have you always been on board with the decision to make it an action RPG and sort of bring more of that combat from Final Fantasy 15? Now, I'll give you my take real quick first, and that's, I am 100% fine with it. I know a lot of people are upset by this, but here's my take, and here's why it's different as well from World of Warcraft Classic. The original Final Fantasy VII, I can play that now. I've been able to play that for a long time on a lot of different platforms. I can play it as it was, with the combat, as the turn-based combat and everything. That's great. That original is out there. Now we're getting a remake, which will be very different, and they will both be available to me, so I can pick and choose which version I play. I have played the old game. I know what it's like. Now, I am willing and happy to take on someone else's take on it. And I think a twist is a bit of fun. It might not work, but they're taking a chance and I'm on board with that. the difference there when people say like, oh, you know, so you're okay with changes to Final Fantasy VII, but not to WoW Classic. Well, we couldn't play vanilla WoW, could we? It wasn't available. And I think that's the huge distinguishing factor. So Kit, are you on board with this decision that they've changed so much of the way in which we play Final Fantasy VII?
Yeah, I think the first thing you do is you have to look at the titles of both of those games and the underlying philosophy that's there, right? WoW Classic is trying to be true to form what the game was in 2004. Final Fantasy VII Remake is like, okay, we might put a new spin on this. And I'm totally fine with them taking that approach. However, it introduces a little bit of uncertainty, right? Because what was it that made the original game so good? Right. And you say, okay, well, it was an epic story, right? It was incredibly well written story. It had very deep character development, like Game of Thrones, take note, right? Like sympathetic, devastating villains. It had peak JRPG, elements to it and just the right amount of, I would say, complexity and nuance and grind to the game, right? Everyone remembers grinding for the Knights of the Round and the Master Materias. And with, groundbreaking 3D graphics at the time and full movie cutscenes, right? That's what made Final Fantasy VII great. Now, if you bring it in and you change some stuff to it, well, you're introducing this risk that you might not do it as well as you'd package it the first time, and that might let some people down. So that's the other side of that coin. However, they go for it, and maybe this new battle, the moving around stuff is going to be really engaging, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's a whole different way to play Final Fantasy VII, or maybe they make Midgar a lot bigger, the world a lot bigger, and there's so much more to explore and lots of little things they can do. That could be wonderful, but it's a risk, right?
Yeah. I should say, I was remiss not to include this, that it's been revealed through interviews that it's not just the combat that's changed, and they have really taken an expanded view of this title. And I was actually really excited. My knee-jerk reaction was to be incensed by this information. But then in about 3 seconds, I changed my mind and said, actually, that's really cool because they've told us that they're expanding on the script. Now, the story is, largely going to stay, well, the story is staying the same effectively, all the notes that they hit, but they've expanded upon little character moments that come up in the game, little nuances that, might be throwaway lines in the original have now been fleshed out into short moments with perhaps some more expansive dialogue, which I'm 100% on board with. I think if they change the script a little bit and make it more human, they have more of these character development moments where you might assign a bit more emotion to some of the more peripheral characters. I'm fucking down. Sign me up. Do you
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we right off the bat, the footage they showed you there of the Avalanche crew, right? Like Biggs and Wedge and Jesse, and with how much more of a character they just made them, I'm spoiler alert, I'm like already devastated at what's going to happen in Sector 7. Like going like, that's going to hit me so much harder than it did in the original. And so on the flip side of that coin, I saw the sort of, Aerith, had a little interaction with Cloud there where she was like, help me. And the first kind of caught me a little off guard because, in the original game, she was a very aloof type of character, which you didn't realize. She was like, you're in a lot of danger, but she wasn't acting like it. And it's because obviously she was an ancient, part of the Zetral race or whatever. Yep. And so she just kind of was like on another plane. So now are they going to change the characters a little bit? And now I'm going to have to kind of adjust my expectations about what is it I should expect going into it. And you kind of have to go into it with the mindset of like, this is a new spin on the old story. And you have to be okay with that.
One quick final point before we turn to Final Fantasy VIII, and you've just raised it there. Now, I'm perfect, and this has been a rather divisive topic. Spoilers. Talking spoilers for Final Fantasy VII. Some people are saying, don't talk about what happens in Final Fantasy VII. It's not fair to the new generation of gamers who want to experience it for the first time. And I appreciate that, there are people who are going through it for the first time, but I'm sorry. I'm one of those people who are like, I'm going to talk about what happens in a 22-year-old game. It's one of those things where like remade movies come out and it's like, what, can we not have discussions about what happens in the movie? And it's a very touchy subject. I appreciate that. And there's equal arguments on both sides. I'll have to throw in a spoiler alert, obviously, at the beginning of this call. But, we haven't gone deep into any of the spoilers so far. You mentioned a couple of light things, nothing major. But how do you feel about that spoiler argument for this game?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got some bad news to tell you about who Darth Vader's true identity is too, right? Like the Sephiroth Aerith interaction is an iconic moment in video game history. And I did the research, and it's like actually like the first Game of Thrones novel had just come out like a few months before. Like what happened there was before this, you did not kill off main characters in video games or in movies or in anything other than like the mentor in the hero's journey, right? Like an Obi-Wan Kenobi type of character. But any like main character, they just didn't die for real. They could die, but they would come back some way. And so this was like really like for kids playing these games, like this was like a big deal, a big shock to the system. And so, I can't wait to see what they have in store on the remake version, because I'm sure I'm going to go all the way through that, roller coaster of emotions again as you get into it. And it's just going to be, well, you got to deal with it.
I must say that your use of the word interaction is probably the greatest euphemism of all time. But BlokkaRoach, let's turn to you. And by the way, I absolutely fucking love your Discord handle. And if people aren't aware who BlokkaRoach is, go ahead and Google that one. But Blokker, let's talk about Final Fantasy VIII. This one came a little bit out of left field. Some people sort of picked it, but they'd been a bit funny about Final Fantasy VIII in the past. And now here's the remaster that a lot of people have been asking for. Now, I don't hate Final Fantasy VIII, but as you can sort of understand, I'm unfortunately one of those people that think that Final Fantasy VIII was a little bit of a letdown for me. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there who go, hey, guess what? Final Fantasy VIII was the best one in the series. Come at me, bro. Tell me why you're excited for Final Fantasy VIII Remaster.
Well, look, for me, I actually don't. It's not my favorite in the series. 10 is actually my favorite in the series, but that's neither here nor there. I was a arcade player when Final Fantasy VII came out. I was playing Street Fighter and shit like that. I never really played console games. And one of my mates played 7, and I would just hear cloud all the time. And it's like, oh my god, dude, seriously, are you in a bromance with this bloody character in this game? And I didn't think much of it. But I happened to be in a Blockbuster and saw Final Fantasy VIII on the shelf and thought, well, fuck it, I'll give it a go. And I took it home to my mate's place, threw it in the PlayStation, and sat there for like 2 days just playing this game, constantly ignoring my mate. I don't think I slept, and just played it all the way through. And ever since that moment, I've loved Final Fantasy. So for me, it is the nostalgia thing, which probably really ties in because, as you said, they're remaking 7, but they're only remastering 8. They're not really making many changes, just updating the graphics, making it look a little bit prettier, which is great too, because I downloaded it on stream a couple of years back, and somebody made a comment about it made your eyes bleed, and it really did. It was just
the Steam version,
unplayable. Yeah, it was just unplayable. I couldn't see anything I was doing. I was just like, I'm not even. I think I played 10 minutes of it.
All right. And it's something that, I mean, it's funny because my girlfriend Patricia loves Final Fantasy VIII. 10 is her favorite, but she's got, a massive, massive soft spot for 8 as well. So I see the people on Twitter saying, this is amazing. And I think it's great that everyone's got this remaster. And I think it's important that, Square Enix pays as much attention to all the titles in the franchise. But it's not necessarily one that I'll be rushing back to. I'll check it out though. I definitely will. I don't know how much time I'll spend with it, but I'll definitely give it a go. I cite the Final Fantasy VIII trailer as one of the big moments of my childhood in gaming. I remember the dropping of that trailer being huge at the time with the cinematics featured there. It was wild. But tell me why you think, if you had to go into bat for Final Fantasy VIII a bit more, Blokker, and say, look, people should, without giving too much away if they haven't played it, but, why should people be more excited for Final Fantasy VIII than they perhaps are?
The story in 7 is being super amazing, but 8, the only thing I could kind of compare it to is I'm currently watching through the Blacklist, and I kind of the story kind of evolves in the same way as you start off as your guy and very, very little about your world. You've got these people who are around you, but you don't really realize how interwoven into your life they are and how far back and how far into the future that story kind of goes. And that's what really drew me in and kept me going. Is like, you start off with these guys and then you meet another guy and apparently it's random, but you realize later on that it's not random. I'm trying not to ruin the story here.
No, sorry. I said without giving too much away, but then I realized that goes against my concept of saying spoilers are fine. So say whatever.
No, I mean, I won't ruin it because like, I think that story is kind of like integral. If you want to really get into 8, just realize that you're going to start off with a fairly simple story and then you're going to realize by the end how much each character's story was interwoven into yours from day dot. It's a completely different story at the end. That's the only that's what drew me in anyway. That's what I think made it good. And of course, the same as you, the trailer when that dropped, it was chills. I'd never had that from a game like that. The music just starting and those cutscenes.
So, Blocker, I should ask, when Final Fantasy VIII Remaster drops, do you drop WoW Classic and put 40 hours straight into Final Fantasy VIII straight, or do you kind of balance it out, or how do you work it in?
I'll have to see. I think probably I will do a playthrough straight away, but one of the game modes that they've announced they're putting into that is the 3x speed mode and the ability to drop the timed events in that. So what I'll probably do is just do that straight away, so I won't necessarily have to do 40 hours. I'll just straight through it, and then I'll probably do a slow play mode later on that I'll do when I just don't feel like playing WoW for whatever reason.
Oh, I didn't know they were doing that. Like, like the emulators do. They allow you to speed it up. I wish more sort of re-releases or remasters would do that. That's, obviously if you've played the game ad infinitum and you're very familiar with it, the ability to speed it up is always appreciated. I mean, I know it's kind of messes with how the game is supposed to be enjoyed and all of that jazz, but I think that's the nice little wrinkle. Guys, I might wind it up there. Thank you so much to everyone for being in on this call. It's been an epic call, and I hope everyone is okay with us. Still, I say it again on the show, going off the beaten path every now and again. You guys know that I like talking about other games. When Countdown to Classic eventually does come to a close, whenever that may be, I do have aspirations of keeping the podcast going and expanding to talking about other games. So consider this a small taste of what may come in the future for the show in just talking about games in general with the community and the news of what's, coming in the way of new releases. So thanks everyone for being in on this call. If anyone has anything to plug, please take that time to do it now. I'm going to go through you all one by one and say thanks for being here. Now let's do it alphabetically perhaps. BlokkaRoach, thanks mate.
Thank you very much. I'm going to plug anything if anybody wants to jump on stream at BlokkaRoach, and I'm playing through Arkham Knight at the moment because I have nothing else to play until Classic comes out. You can watch me Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Very good. That's BlokkaRoach, BLOKKAROACH. And Freelancer, thanks so much for being here, mate.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I say, if I have anything to plug, it would be the game that we showed off at E3 this year. It's Wrath, and you can find it at wrath.game. That's pretty easy website.
Very good. Very, very good. And Kit, thanks so much for being here, mate.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Lokth, thank you, mate, as always.
Thank you. And for those of you who are interested, you can find me at twitch.tv/Lokth, Lokth. I've been streaming a small bit of Classic and Hollow Knight, another game that I'm very much looking forward to getting a sequel to very soon.
Very good. I did see that one as well, yes. And Panophobic, thanks for being here, mate.
Oh, glad to be here. I'm not streaming quite yet, but I'll be putting some beta stuff up probably in a week or two. Twitch.tv/Panophobic, PAN0PHOBI.
BIK, yes. And Surnami, thanks so much as always.
Oh, thank you for having me. I also have 2 words to say to you, Josh, why Final Fantasy VIII is superior to Final Fantasy VII. It's triple triad.
Triple triad, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love triple triad, don't get me wrong. I don't want to make it sound like I hate Final Fantasy VIII. I do like it, but yeah, I love triple triad.
That game just makes it's the best.
And I have one word to say that will be the reason why Final Fantasy VI is better than both 7 and 8. Kafka.
Oh, God, yes, I love Final Fantasy VI. Zetral, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, it was great to be part of my first segment. I'm obsessed with anything and everything video games, so if you ever want me back, let me know. And WoW comes out and Countdown to Classic turns into a podcast about beer, I'm definitely coming back.
Thanks very much, mate. Hi everyone, Josh here. I just want to take a quick moment to remind you that while Countdown to Classic will always be a podcast you can get for free, if you do happen to really enjoy the show and find yourself always coming back for more, then please do check out the show's Patreon page to see how you can help keep the lights on at Countdown to Classic and even vote on show content as the show continues to bring you more and more classic WoW goodness. Alternatively, if monthly subscriptions aren't your thing, you can always visit the show's tip jar over at Ko-Fi, with that link being in the show notes and on the website too. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, it's time for another Countdown to Classic call, and we are talking about something that we should have addressed a long time ago, to be honest with you. And one of the callers on the line now has been absolutely busting to talk about this, been getting PMs every now and again going, Josh, you ready? You ready? I'm itching to talk about it. And thankfully, we're finally here. Let's introduce that person, friend of the show and a regular, Taladril. What's good, my man?
Hey, glad to be back here. Thank you very much.
Mate, always a pleasure to have you back. I love chatting with you, and I know that you're really passionate about this one, so I'm very, very excited for what's to come. And the reason that we're doing this call now about the topic of world buffs is because the next person on this call actually put up a post that really grabbed my attention and was so excellently written through the week on the subreddit, and they very much so agreed with many of the points that you raised, Taladril. So it will be a little bit of an echo chamber here, guys. I do apologize for that. I would have loved to have got a contrarian in on this call, but couldn't find anyone. But if you're listening and you want to come back and talk about an opposing point of view later on, then just let me know. But let's welcome Dom. How are you, mate?
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much for having me.
My absolute pleasure. Now, Dom, I'm going to start with you and talk about this post that you put up. Tell us what your generic, obviously a rather extended TLDR about what you said, and also why you said it.
All right, so basically, here's a little bit of pre-story. So world buffs, especially Dark Moon Fair buffs, which are available only once every month, they kind of force you to log out to preserve these buffs. So we're doing Nax, and we had one raid with DMF, and then there's another 7 days to the next raid, which means you have to be locked up for 5. So my main character was locked out for 5 days straight, and I was leveling my little ult in the meanwhile. My warlock going through Stranglethorn Vale, and I think you can sort of see where this is already going. That I was getting ganked mercilessly up and down STV, and I mean, I usually just bring my main in. If you gank me once too many, I'm going to bring my main and gank you back and camp you till you leave me alone. But I couldn't do that. So the frustrations were growing quite a bit. And it ended up in that Reddit post you see. I just typed my heart out for half an hour and I posted it. You can even see a little error in the title. So that's basically the story.
Okay, so that's the reasoning why you put that one up. But let's talk about some of the points that you made. And I think Taladril is going to be nodding his head along a lot as you go through this. And I guess I should just set you up very easily with this one. World buffs, are you for or against them, and why?
I am against them in their current incantation. I play on Northdale, it should be said. I'm a private server dude. I've been playing since January, so quite fresh at that. But I am already getting annoyed at the whole world buff thing, because it is just a chore. I don't mind farming consumes. I show up to every raid fully consumed. It's no problem. Absolutely. But the whole thing about world buffs is that it's just a chore, and it actually promotes just not playing the game. And I don't think that's very good game design, that you actually just can't play your character.
Now, it was so jarring for me to see, and you did it so well, to see how you put forward what actually happens when people, if they want to go out of their way to collect all the world buffs that they can. And obviously there's some difficulty behind going out and actually getting them all. And some people pushing back against you guys might be like, well, you just said it's not playing the game, but I had to try really hard to go out and collect all those world buffs. So, isn't that something in and of itself?
Yeah, I would say, there's a certain kind of difficulty to it, but you get used to it, and clearing a Diamond Tribute is not hard when you do it every single week for every single raid.
It's a tedium, it's not a difficulty.
I would say that, the tedium, and it just gets old.
Fair enough. So you listed everything that's out there, and obviously I'll just go through them real quickly without sort of saying what they all do. But, you talked about Rallying Cry of the Dragon Slayer, Spirit of Zandalar, Songflower Serenade, Slipkick Savvy, Warchief's Blessing, Fengus's Ferocity, Moldar's Moxie, and Sage's Dark Fortune of Damage. And you basically spelled out that, as you mentioned in the post, if you're a Fury Warrior, then that means you're getting 10% crit, plus 15 to all attributes, plus 15% to all attributes on top of that, plus 300 hit points, plus 15% hit points on top of that, plus 340 attack power, plus 10% damage, and plus 15% melee haste, which is absolutely insane. Taladril, when you hear that list, are your eyes rolling? What do you think of that?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's crazy. I was able to look at some parses and compare stuff. The difference between world buffs and not world buffs is at a minimum 30% damage increase, just across the board. 30%. At most, at least up to 60% increase. So you're talking, pretty much an increased raid strength of 150% over a regular raid on average, I would say. And that's not even pulling a sweat for people. So it's crazy. And that's just one factor of it. When you increase with the 15% all attributes and the 15% hit points, now you've got over a 30% health pool increase. And that makes stuff really, really easy because it gives so much of a buffer for every single person in the raid. People can get sloppy. People can cheese certain concepts. It trivializes the content in such a way that it's boring in that sense.
Well, let's talk about that point first and foremost. And once we're done with this, we'll get to, you guys were about to have a back and forth about the timers before we got started. And I'd love to get into that just after we address this. And that is that point of trivialization. And again, I'll try and push back as much as I can here, guys. And, even though I sort of neither agree nor disagree with you, I'm very much so a bit nonchalant about this topic in general. But, I do sort of go, well, it was in the game. It doesn't bother me. I didn't go around farming world buffs, obviously, because I wasn't raiding. But, it doesn't bother me as much because people might say, well, how does it affect you? And that's the primary argument that we see that comes back against you, I think, on this one, Taladril, where people say, what do you care if people are, wanting to trivialize their content? It's not trivializing your content. What would you say about that?
If people think that they aren't going to be pressured into getting world buffs by even the most casual of guilds, then they are in for a surprise. Every single guild
100%.
pushes for buffs, like every single one. It's pathetic. So This is just a blanket statement. Everybody is going to get world buffs. I don't care who you are. I don't care how casual you are. You're going to get world buffs.
Even the casuals, you say?
The most casuals, yeah, because it's like the only way they can do content easily, because it's like easy mode. So it's like, please guys get world buffs because we suck so much. So let's get these and make it easier for us to do it. You're going to get them. 100% chance.
Dom, you're on board with that?
Oh yeah, I was trying not to interrupt, but 100%. I think people are in for a surprise because, the main argument is, well, just don't get them if you don't want to. But if you want to be at the pointy end of raiding, if you want to be in a guild that performs well, you will be required to do it. Maybe not to such an extreme extent, but you will be getting DMT, you will be getting a head, and you will be getting a heart every single raid.
Yes, every single guild, no matter who they are, is always going to be going for the Ani head and the ZG buff because it's so very easy to get. All you have to do is stand in your capital city and get it, and then all you have to do is teleport on over or take a flight path on over, get the heart, and then you go to the dungeon. But in terms of hardcore guilds, like 100% of the people are going to get Dire Maul plus Songflower plus all the others, and those are slightly more optional, but extremely suggested by everybody.
Now, I'm with you on the hardcore guilds there, and I think I should probably arc up a bit more, as we say in Australia, and argue against you two a little bit. Just in saying that, I think, because you definitely raised my eyebrow when you said it as well, in terms of the blanket coverage of, all guilds will be wanting to do this. And I was kind of sitting there cocking my head going, will they? Do you really think that? Because, and again, Twitch chat's lighting up again now, and this is your chance, guys, to obviously defend your stance, but we've got, listeners like, K-Sir, Geefmane and Norfair, who are all in the Discord as well, saying that, the following points, that the content isn't that hard without the buffs, so we can't see that many people running around to get them, as per Norfair. And then, we've got K-Sir saying, and I agree with this point from K-Sir, saying it's a bit much to go full blanket statement there. I think that might be a little bit hyperbolic to suggest that all the guilds that play Classic will be pressured somewhat to go for the world buffs. I think there's going to be a lot of casual guilds that will either just say, fucking, we don't have the time or the inclination to go and do this. Let's just give it a crack without the world buffs, and if we don't do it, we don't do it. Do you see what I'm saying here, Taladril? Would you have a comeback to that?
I see what you're saying, but once you feel the power of the world buffs, you realize how much of a game changer it is. And then you realize, God, I'm sort of an idiot for not doing this, because it's way too easy to get them and to stack them all and to do it. So the thing is like the Dire Maul buffs, only one group needs to even clear the dungeon. So then all you are is like, if you're super casual, like, I don't want to clear it. And all you have to do is you just stand there and you can chat with people. And then they clear it, and then you join their raid group, and then when they leave, you just simply run into the dungeon, you just run down to the end, you click the buff me with the, king buff, and then you go back and you click on the other bosses and you get it, and then it's like teleport out, go to Stormwind or whatever, wait for your Ani head buff, and you're done. Like, it takes no mental effort to do, so it's just sort of like, why don't you just log on a half hour early and do it? That's pretty much all people have to do.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, what kind of riled me up is all these people saying that the timers, maybe that was a prompt you were coming with.
Yeah, go for it.
The timers are gonna change everything. You're only gonna be able to drop a hit every 12 hours. But the head buff gives you such an incredible boost that if you manage to snag a head buff 1 or 2 days in advance, what are you gonna do with it on your main? You're not gonna just use it for grinding. You're gonna lock your ass off.
Yep, that will absolutely be a thing.
It will not fix anything.
People will just simply be. They're gonna just get the buff. They're gonna do all this stuff the day before. They're gonna get the buff, and then they're going to log off and purposefully not be on their main character until the day of the raid, and then they'll probably get the ZG buff at that point with the whole raid, and then fly out and get to their raids. But it's bad gameplay mechanics where you are encouraged effectively by taking this easy route to purposely log out of your main character and not play them until raid time. And the raid buffs just make it such easy mode that's what happens. I mean, it's sad to see it. And I know people want to be like, oh, it can't be that bad. It happens every single guild. I mean, I don't know. There's not a single casual guild that I didn't see people doing this on. Everybody did it.
It'll be interesting to see when obviously Classic comes out, and we're all expecting a lot of people to be playing Classic. But I mean, Taladril, sort of, again, if I push back on the sky is falling kind of line, if people were to say, or if I were to say to you, I mean, would you concede somewhat that there's still going to be plenty of guilds out there that won't make this mandatory, don't you think? People will have options.
They'll still do the Stormwind buff if possible, and definitely the ZG buff. That'll just be expected that you'll sort of go to those islands and get those and head out at that point. Like, that'll be pretty much expected. Definitely the ZG one, because you have to conglomerate anyway for a raid day. So you might as well conglomerate in a spot, get a buff, and go out. Like, I mean, the ZG buff even adds movement speed. Like, It's really nice to have.
Do you guys recall if back in the vanilla days what the attitude was towards world buffs? Obviously, we've had the benefit of years of private servers behind us with this becoming the meta as Taladril has described. Look, but I think obviously we do need to distinguish between the average or the casual private server player and perhaps the casual classic player, because I think they'll be two very different kinds of beasts.
So I can definitely tell you that the hardcore player, you had that interview with 1927.
Yep.
Episode 94, because I've got it in front of me, if anybody wants to check that out. He specifically said that they did not use world buffs for progression in AQ. And they were one of the top guilds in the world. So we know from that anecdote that it was not a known thing or a used thing for using world buffs for regular raids, at least up until AQ. It took until Nax for people to start really using that. Now, the point of that is it's like at that point late in the game, nobody knew that they existed. So, of course, casual guilds didn't use them in Classic. So it doesn't really say much, you know. But with the knowledge, it's that Pandora's box situation where people know about it now, so the dynamic is going to be different.
Now, Dom, I'll turn to you in a sec. Taladril, I should say, I always get a kick out of, and it's been happening a lot lately, sort of more so over the past 6 weeks, where people quote countdown episodes back to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I think that was said on the show, and people know countdown better than the fucking host, which I've done so many calls now that I have to get reminded, so thank you for reminding me of that. But Dom, I'd ask you now, as we sort of hit the home turn on this call, one of the final points that you raised in your post was that, you know, and Taladril has definitely somewhat talked about this, but let's just dive into it a bit more. You've said that, you know, this attitude towards world buffs can create more of a toxic raid environment and perhaps more of a, you know, a negative experience for some players as they're pushed to go and gain all of these buffs that they might not have wanted to. Then maybe they wanted to put their time into doing something else. But I'd ask you to basically explain, do you have any ideas for how you would, if I could give you the keys to the car, how would you change it? Is the answer only to get rid of them all? Or do you think there's a nice, you know, creamy in-between space where we can work something out? And obviously we know that, you know, I should have said this at the start, guys. Preamble, we know that world buffs aren't changing in Classic. We're not, you know, necessarily suggesting that that could be on the table. We fucking know it's not going to change. But I'm just asking these guys hypothetically, if you could tweak with the system, what would you do?
To answer the first part of that prompt about the toxic raid environment, last raid we had 2 dudes who got ganked after sitting a week on buffs, and they didn't even show up on the meters because you just don't perform as a DPS against other DPS if you don't have them. So they've done all this work and they've been locked out for a week, and they just get ganked, and they could basically go AFK for 2 hours and not really do anything.
When people die before or during a raid who had world buffs and then they no longer do, especially if it's a whole raid, the entire raid dynamic changes to a much more negative outlook. It's shockingly bad, and it just is really depressing. So world buffs are so irritating in the sense that, especially when people die, and it's like you wipe on the very first mob in AQ or something like that, like the entire rest of the night is ruined pretty much because of that situation.
Everyone's mates until you lose your world buffs, Taladril.
Yeah, I think I wrote in the post that you can wipe 10 times in a night, but people will remember that first wipe that stripped the raid buffs.
Yep.
They'll remember that. They won't remember the other ones.
That's the only one they care about. It doesn't matter about dying. It's about losing world buffs.
I also go brain AFK if I lose my shit early. You can just
people do. People start getting sloppy instantly once that happens. Instantly.
You're not parsing. You're not doing anything. And it really helps on some difficult fights because it's not really as much in AQ, maybe a little bit, but in Nax there are some extremely hard gear checks which you just have to do, and these world buffs help immensely. I think we did a 4-minute, 5-minute patchwork before, and then we went in with world buffs, and we did it under 3 minutes. And it fucked everyone's timers up.
However, though, it is doable to do Nax without world buffs. I mean, we've shown that 100%. with the
We've
travel space. So,
I mean, we had 4 weeks of no world buffs in Nax, where we had to clear without it, and it was just the most liberating thing. Not having to go through this show. It was so nice playing without world buffs in Nax. So nice. Because you didn't have to do all this pre-work. You could just die and reconsume and you'd be all fine. And it was really challenging content. I think that's the gist of it. It was actually challenging. We had some close shaves on Lokth.
Yeah, now it's exciting. It's good. You got to focus more. But so I'm gonna push back.
To segue into how I would change it, I would probably do something like that grace period, because it's not going to change. Like, it is pretty selfish of me to sit here and argue that something I don't like should be changed. I don't think that's reasonable, but I do like that 1 month, maybe 2, of progression without world buffs that Northdale did, because that you actually get to see the content, how it's really quote unquote supposed to be tuned and played, because they did a marvelous job on that.
I would say that they just simply shouldn't be in raids at all. Why have a grace period? We don't need WoW to have an easy mode ever. Like, it's doable at the hard mode, might as well keep it without world buffs. World buffs we see don't really add anything except making things easier. So why have that? But I'm going to get on my high horse soapbox and say, I think we can change this. And the reason being is that we need to look at it differently, and the devs need to look at it differently. This is not classic. This is not a quote unquote no changes. What we need to look at this as is an undiscovered, because it was very unused back in classic, an undiscovered exploit. That is a thing that shouldn't be in the game, because it is an imbalance that was only discovered until late game and or TBC. And there is proof of this, because the WoW devs did make these not stack for level 70 players. They removed them from the game effectively. Patch 2.1.0, they made those buffs where they were no longer effective on targets over level 63. So obviously, in TBC, people were still going back and using these buffs because they were that good in TBC content, in raids, I would quite imagine. And Blizzard saw that as an exploit, and they changed it so that it was no longer effective for top tier rating. And they should do that for vanilla too. It was a thing they didn't realize in vanilla. It's a thing that shouldn't exist, and it's a thing that just messes up the whole gameplay. And so that's an exploit, and it should go away. That's my stance.
Taladril, I'm going to be cheeky and say you're just getting on the soapbox now?
Of course. It's a very tall soapbox.
It's got extensions. Okay. Dom, go for it. Did you sound like you had something to say to that?
Well, I was just laughing at the multi-state soapbox. I didn't know they actually removed them in TBC, but that is a very good point, actually.
Guys, I real quick, just to finish this one up, as I say, if you had a choice, let's say I give you the option to remove, 2 buffs from the game. Which ones would you pick and why?
In terms of, honestly, I would say ZG for sure, because that one adds 15% all stats. And honestly, maybe I would remove the one that's the 15% health, because that's probably even worse than the damage, is what that extra health can do to really mitigate people being idiots. And that when you have more deaths more frequently, that makes content harder.
I would agree with the CG buff, but I think that the DPS increase just makes content so trivial. Like, you'll never see a phase 2 Ragnaros if you're well buffed, and you'll just pass through everything. So I would remove the rallying cry of the Dragon Slayer, definitely. Mm-hmm. Also because it messes up class balance. The world buff just makes the Fury Warrior so good, and the Rogue compared to casters, for example, that it
really makes it a melee game for sure. I mean, it's crazy how much it adds. Honestly, for me, like, what I've felt from world buffs and how they changed the raid dynamic, to me, it's like almost a game-breaking issue. Like, I would take virtually anything that WoW did that was a mistake over the fact that world buffs exist. I think world buffs are such a toxic thing that were added to the game in the sense of how the meta changed. I'd take flying mounts. I'd take LFD. Honestly, I think the world buffs are just game breaking.
All right. And look, here's what I want to say about this one as I end this call, guys. Obviously, we've heard some pretty strong opinions on this topic, and it's something that might have snuck up on some of you and thought it wasn't sort of a topic that warranted much discussion. But there are obviously people out there that feel very strongly about, the other side of world buffs, of, perhaps not using them or getting rid of them. Now, if you're listening to this call right now and you are screaming in the car or what have you and going, I disagree, well, please do contact me, because as you've heard on the show recently, I'm more than happy to have a return of serve another week on the show. So if you've got something that goes a little bit beyond no changes, if you've actually got some really good constructive points to hit back at Taladril and Dom, obviously in a respectful and mature way, maybe with a slight shot at the soapbox, but then just contact me and we can have a fun chat about it. But look, Taladril, as always, mate, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And Dom, thank you so much for coming on too.
Thank you very much for having me.
And Taladril, sorry, I should just say before you go, please do give a big plug for where people can find you. And also, I'm not sure if we mentioned, there's a place, or you've recorded something recently where people can find a bit more information about this. Is that right?
Yes, so I was able to convince Melderon to do my bidding, and he made a video with my help with writing a script. So you can see it on his YouTube channel. For those of you who are getting it live, that is going to be this weekend. So definitely. But yeah, you can always check me out on the Druid Discord or Theory Crafting Discord, either of those.
I must admit, Taladril, I love seeing the name recognition you're getting around the forums and whatnot when I just see, not quite in these words, but I see a few sort of like, hail Taladrils. Go Taladril. We love you, Taladril. I love seeing you getting obviously some kudos for the work that you do within the community.
Yeah, it's nice to see for sure.
And Dom, is there anything you want to plug, mate? Do you do any YouTubing or anything that you'd like to let people know about?
No, not yet. At least I started back in January. I'm still kind of fresh to WoW, but I will definitely be playing, and I'm gonna be playing with my guild guide on Live EU. Check us out. And of course, a huge shout out to my buddies in Global Gym on Northdale for taking me in and making a raider out of me. And lastly, shout out to my good friend Vengeance, who's taught me pretty much everything I know about warriors.
Very good. And great guild name. I love that, Globo Gym. Very good. All right, guys. Thanks. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right, it's time for another countdown to classic call and yet another follow-up from something that we heard about last week. Guys, this is going to happen occasionally on the show. Obviously, if we talk about a relatively divisive topic, where I'm more than happy to have a case in reply heard on the show the following week. So if people contact me and say, Josh, I really disagree with a few points that I heard on the show, I'd love to put my point of view forward, then please do contact me as these two fine gentlemen have done during the past week. Now, again, I stuffed up. I always do this on the show. I'm still learning, guys, but I said during the stream sniping call last week that I would struggle to believe that anyone would disagree with some of the viewpoints raised in this call. And of course, that's a fucking ridiculous thing to say, because you're always going to find people with varying opinions on, any topic that you raise. So my point was more, I think that you'd struggle to find people that want stream snipers, sort of stream sniping, the action of it completely banned, and society should shun any instance of stream sniping. But obviously there's a lot of grey areas in between when we talk about this. So let's welcome our two callers who both contacted me with great points during the week to oppose what we heard before. Tim, welcome back. Always great to have you on the show. TianSG.
Thanks, man. And I just want to one more time say congratulations to the Toronto Raptors for their World Championship.
Absolutely. For all you NBA heads out there and sports fans, I'm a big sports fan as well. I've been keeping tab of the NBA Finals. It was a great series, and absolutely congratulations to all our Canadian friends and the Toronto Raptors and Kawhi Leonard. Jesus Christ, he is unbelievable. And let's next welcome Shammy. How are you, mate? First time on the show.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be on. Fun fact, Shammy is actually my nickname, not a reference to the class. But yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, well, guys, let's get into it. Both of you, as I said, Shammy, you wrote me a phenomenal email about this counterpoint, I should say, during the week. And Tim, you and I went back and forth in the Discord about it. And again, the guys talked about this through the week on the Discord, and it's one of those things that could have devolved at any point, but you're all so excellent and so mature in discussing it. No one took it to sort of any great extreme or said anything horrible. And Tim, you and I went back and forth with an analogy that I actually rather enjoyed and wanted to flesh out a bit more, but we'll get to that soon, that SNL analogy that we talked about. And I just actually want to start with the first timer. And Shammy, I'll turn to you and get you to effectively summarize that amazing email you sent to me with the counterpoints that you raised. Tell me what irked you a little bit in the call that you heard this week and what you would say in response.
Well, there are obviously a couple points. So first of all, I think has been sort of an interesting debate on what a stream sniper even means to, all types of people. And I thought it was important that if we are going to talk about this sort of subject, that we really pin down on a specific definition that we can all sort of agree on, everybody, or I shouldn't say everybody, but, people enjoy ganking low-level players just for the sake of ganking low-level players. And that is something that I feel like, has this intrinsic value or intrinsic satisfaction in the game. So stream snipers are sort of a specific breed of that, where it just feels like it's not just somebody who's ganking indiscriminately. They're going out to hunt streamers for the attention of the stream and the streamer, right? There's sort of an extrinsic satisfaction that they're trying to get rather than something that's coming out of the game itself. They're looking for some sort of satisfaction outside of the game. I mean, would you say that's a sort of fair definition of a stream sniper?
Yeah, and I think it's something that we haven't necessarily stated on the show, that there is, whether they're getting their hit, if you will, from that thrill of being recognized externally.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, just with that definition in mind, some sort of, quick bullet list of things that we can sort of talk about is how, when we are looking to enjoy the idea of a classic server and what that sort of entails, it means a lot of things, obviously. But I think one of the, most important things is your social status, right? So your reputation on a server. So if you were a low-B ganker or, whatever else, it was a reputation that sort of stuck to you and would affect your, social prospects on your faction or cross-faction play. If you were a ninja looter, that would affect your whole gameplay. So this idea of a reputation is sort of intrinsic to WoW Classic. And so what I think Soda put forward is kind of like the ultimate version of that, where there's these big boys on the server and they have a lot of pull with who has a good reputation, who has a bad reputation. And it's all sort of like fair play in Classic, much more than it is in retail WoW. And so these stream snipers receiving shunned reputations or whatever is very reflective, in my opinion, of just what Classic entails in the first place. But then we can also sort of go on to this idea where I feel like there is something to be said, streamers have their own armies, they've got their own bodyguards and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, I think that's a good point. They can definitely utilize these sort of armies or, whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of the time what streamers, or in Soda's case specifically, he's looking for is an experience where none of that at all comes into play. So, he's just playing Classic. He's not looking for any free handouts, and he's not looking for any negatives that come with all of that.
Right. We'll get into that. We'll get into that sort of a bit later in the call. But Tim, I know you've got to run relatively soon, so I'll get what I can out of you now. But I just wanted you to hear what Shammy had to say, because I feel like that falls in line a lot with some of the things that you were raising during the week. But you also raised the point that Shammy hasn't touched on just yet, of, whether we consider that, this is their livelihood. Streamers have a very vested interest, obviously, in having a smooth stream and a smooth experience, because it's literally their job and their source of income. So I'd just ask you, do you agree with some of the points that Shammy's just raised, and do you have anything to expand on? And also, what do you have to say about that sort of livelihood point?
Yeah, I mean, I think I pretty much agree with everything that you were saying there, Shammy. Very well put. Especially the part about like the community reaction. I mean, that's the thing that I think is most weird to me about this. A lot of people are upset with how Soda reacted, but Soda was like, no, I don't want to ban them. I want community repercussions, which everybody, when people were clamoring for classic WoW, that's what people wanted. They wanted that thing where a ninja looter would get punished by getting on everybody's blacklist, by being known throughout the server as don't group with that guy. You know, he's a ninja looter. Well, here is that in action. Here is, like Soda is, yeah, he's got a big following and all that stuff, but he's, in terms of an influence on the server, it'd probably be a similar level of, say, like the top guild master of the best guild on the server back in the vanilla days. And if you piss that person off, he's got friends in every other guild and can get you blacklisted, you know? So whether or not it's right or wrong, that's what we want from community policing. But in terms of stream sniping as well, for me personally, and I'm going to make this sort of clear cut, for me personally, I think stream sniping is very dumb. As Shammy said, it's very narcissistic and just trying to get something for themselves personally. And so I find it dumb and stupid. If I could snap my fingers personally, get rid of all stream snipers, I would. But that's not how the actual world works, and that's not how we should implement rules and laws and all that stuff. So yeah, and so I brought up when we were talking with like the livelihood thing, you know, because there were a lot of arguments, and there were arguments brought up on the call from last week where people were basically saying, well, they're streamers, they should expect this. This is part of it. What real damage is this doing? And it's, imagine if somebody walked into your place of business and started harassing you, whatever it is that you do for a living. You work in law, obviously, Josh. So imagine if somebody just showed up in the courtroom and just started like shouting out, "Hey, Josh, you suck."
Yeah, I do get heckled. I do get heckled sometimes. So I know what it's like.
But like, nobody would accept that. Like, that wouldn't be acceptable. No business would accept that in a place of work. They would kick that person out and be like, you can't interrupt this. Because this is somebody's livelihood. And this is like, people are making money doing this. People are working for whatever it is they're working. So I think it's perfectly reasonable that stream snipers get punished in one way or another. That this is affecting people's mental health, livelihoods. Like, these are all important things. And yeah, and like to mention earlier, because you talked about the SNL analogy we were talking about, which is that SNL is also a live thing. There's audience participation, at least as far as, reacting to jokes. Sometimes they have people in the audience or interact with the audience directly. But we don't, if some crazy person got up and like interrupted a set, we wouldn't sit there and go, well, that's to be expected, and have nothing happen. You know what I mean? But like, it's one of those things where like we don't accept it in other avenues of life. It's just that because streaming has been such a new thing in the last few years, and trying to figure out what is and isn't allowed, what should and shouldn't be allowed is so new. It's like Wild West. Because these things have been allowed for a long time and have been sort of, accepted for a while. Now that we're starting to realize actually this isn't that great and we should fix this, we should work on this. People are, well, especially the vocal people who like to do this stuff, are pushing back against it and having issues with it.
All right. Now, Tim, this is obviously an analogy that got me a bit interested, and you perked me up in the Discord through the week when we started talking about this because, obviously all having a bit of fun and tongue-in-cheek, and analogies can go as far as we need them to go. But with that SNL thing, I thought, let's talk about this. And Shammy, do listen in, and I'd love to get your take on this once Tim and I are done having a bit of fun with each other here. But Tim, you said yes. Okay, let's break this down and picture it. SNL, filmed in studio, live in New York, right? You've got the safe environment there, the setup, you've got the structure of the studio, you've got the security, you've got the gated, the audience coming in that you've effectively selected to, sit there and not mess with you and you do your thing. Now, my pushback initially was, okay, Tim, let's say, obviously SNL has the choice to record wherever they want. Let's say one week they go, you know what? We're going to do a holiday special, SNL live from Central Park, right? And we're going to take all of our crew down to the middle of Central Park, no security, no nothing. And we're just going to put the cameras there and do the skits. And, obviously members of the public can waltz in and out and do what they feel. And we'd be expecting or hoping that people simply would respect what we're doing and let us be and let us do our thing. And obviously that could cause mayhem. That's my analogy effectively for what streamers do, is that they walk into the Wild Wild West, they broadcast their position, and sometimes people might not touch them. Sometimes people might come and mess with them. Now, the people that mess with them are within their rights to do so. Outside of Twitch TOS, within the game, they're within their rights to do so. Much as people in the middle of Central Park are well within their rights. It's not a crime to go and walk into the middle of the frame and wave to mum and dad back home while SNL is recording. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I mean, but that's the funny thing, is that is all 100%. And so SNL has security and they have rules. And like, as you mentioned, they if they went and did film in Central Park, which I'm sure they've probably done before, they might usually, if they go outside the studio, they don't do things live to account for that. But B, they also will have security and they will have protection, not just from like people, like streakers or something like that, but also just like actual security from dangerous things. And that we all accept that because we know that that's right and that's normal. And so I think the weird thing on this pushback is people are having issues with Soda basically saying, I'm going to have security. People are having issues with video games. Blizzard has been fairly lax on like stream sniping. Like, I don't think in Overwatch there's any rules that Blizzard has about stream sniping. But Blizzard has always been pretty lax, but other games are not. Like PUBG, I think Fortnite are pretty, like, if you're proven to be stream sniping, like, you'll get banned from the game. It's not just a Twitch TOS thing. And people are like having issues with that, but it's sort of like, well, this is like the game isn't profiting from this. In fact, the game might be losing stuff from this because they're benefiting from streamers, and if streamers are getting hurt, it's a problem for them. So it makes sense that they have security. Like, it's that weird thing of, if we're saying that streamers need to accept the repercussions for streaming, then we should also say that stream snipers need to accept the repercussions for stream sniping. And that means increased security, having punishments for doing that from Twitch or from the streamers themselves. This is just part of that. Like, this is how we live in the world. But again, it's because it is a wild west of the internet and streaming nowadays. People are just pushing back on it, but such is life.
Now, last pushback on the analogy, Tim, and then Shammy, I'll come back to you. But you talked about, obviously, the addition of security. That's an option that will, it would be somewhat of a prerequisite. If SNL is crazy enough to film in Central Park, they would need to bring their own security. And my point back on that one, well, yes. And when they bring that security, or as Kit is raising in Twitch chat, if they'd have to go and get their permits to film in that area, they create special rules that change it from a public area to a private location, perhaps. Well, once you build that up, the security, the permit to film and whatnot, that's effectively the creation of your PvE server. That's the option that they have. They have the option to do that. And obviously it's the smarter option because then they know people won't mess with them. And that's the option that sits there for streamers going, well, I can just play on a PvE server and that's my permit and that's my security team and I'm safe and I can entertain people. So that's kind of my retort there. But I understand that you might say, and this is a point I wanted you to quickly go in on now, and it's something that I'm sort of not struggling to wrap my head around on, but I'm not as much with you when you say that, I am with you, but, why should they be forced to play a certain way? If they want to play PvP servers, then let them do it without interference. In a way, I'm probably taking your words a bit far there. What do you say to that?
Well, so my thing with that is PvE servers would be not doing it live, basically. If you're talking about SNL, that's what that would actually be. But an integral part of Saturday Night Live and impromptu comedy in general is the live nature of it, is the fact that some of the best moments of SNL have come from people screwing up, people making up lines, like people breaking down, laughing during the middle of skits. Like that is very fun and very humanizing, a lot of it. So, like, I'm sure they've had issues at SNL with like people, screaming things from the audience and whatnot, but it would be the equivalent of saying, well, all comedians should therefore, because they might get heckled, like if they don't want to be heckled, then boo, they should just not do live shows, or all impromptu shows should not be live. But that's a little bit ridiculous because something really is important about being live. Just like with PvP, there's great stuff to be had from PvP, and most people who do PvP are not stream snipers, So it's like I don't think it's right to force, like as you were saying, I don't think it's right to say to streamers, well, you should be forced to play a certain way if you're going to stream. I don't think Blizzard would want that to be out there. Personally, just because, I mean, they clearly are valuing streamers and streamers' opinions and all that stuff with how the beta is going. So while I do understand that sort of sentiment of wanting to be like, oh, whatever, man, PvP, it's just PvP, it's what it is. Well, again, I just come back to, I'm not advocating in this particular case that Blizzard lay down the ban hammer on stream snipers. Far from it. But like, again, I just think stream snipers need to accept the consequences. If, there was a guy, one of the people I was talking to on the Discord about this, when I talked about that blacklist that Soda Poppin made, his response to that was like, great, I'd be proud if I got in that blacklist. And I'm like, okay, cool, that's great. But the problem is a lot of these people who are trying to defend stream snipers seem to not be, like, they seem to be offended that they would have to suffer a repercussion for doing a shitty thing, which is such a weird mentality, but it is, stream snipers are doing shitty things, so it makes sense that they have a shitty mentality about it. So,
Okay. Now, Tim, sorry, thanks so much for that. I know you had to get a lot of that in because you've got to run.
I was going to say, I actually have to go right now. So
no, you go for it.
Shammy was really much more intelligent than I am about that. So
okay, you go nuts, mate.
I trust you. You have my proxy, Shammy.
I got you.
You go nuts,
Thanks,
Tim.
guys.
Thanks so much for dropping in. We'll talk to you next time. Now, Shammy, I'll turn to you. And sorry, thanks so much for your patience, Shammy. I knew I wanted to get that in from Tim because he had to run. But is there anything you've heard there that you'd like to expand upon before we sort of round out this call?
Yeah, actually, so you brought up the point of a PvE server as sort of being that security bubble that a streamer could utilize, right? So I thought that is a good point, but there is something that bothers me a little bit about that. Soda is known for being a PvP player. He's known for his dueling, his druid plays or whatever, and we kind of touched on, streaming is a job for these sorts of people. And so Soda has sort of made, a career out of being a WoW PvPer. And so is it kind of a little bit unreasonable to expect a PvP player to not engage in world PvP because of their complaints about stream sniping? I think there's something to be said for the fact that it's effectively asking them to not do part of their job in sort of why people watch them in the first place,
Yeah, more than fair enough to raise. And I understand the effect. And, like Tim said, this is their livelihood, and particularly someone like Soda, who is regarded as, such a great PvP player and has, got the evidence out there on stream to show that he can more than hold his own. Going around and getting engaged in PvP is part of his bread and butter and part of what will obviously generate viewers for his stream. So I appreciate that there is a very vested interest in somehow protecting this. And I guess now that we've heard this week and we've heard last week, as you touched on as well, there are other options too. And I guess if anyone's sort of blood is boiling from what you've heard during this call, please go back and refer to last week's call for the counterpoints to this one. So we've heard both arguments now and we've been fair to both sides, but you've raised some really great arguments there, Shammy. Is there anything more that you'd like to add before we go in terms of, I guess, one of the things that I've been struggling to wrap my head around, and you sort of lightly touched on this, is how people divide the line between people who corpse camp and people who stream snipe, because both you and Tim seem to have said, yeah, look, if you stream snipe incessantly, you're a bit of an asshole and it's not cool. But we kind of seem to not do that for corpse campers. Like we do, you corpse camp, you're a bit of a dick, but we give them a massive bit of grace, if you will, as well, and say, well, it's within the rules. So this seems to irk some people more when we talk about stream sniping. Why do you think that is?
So I think it kind of goes back to that aspect I talk about where one can get an extrinsic satisfaction and an intrinsic satisfaction. So, corpse camping, it's kind of a jerk thing to do, but it's also an intrinsic satisfaction. It's something that you're getting satisfied by from within the game. you're corpse camping somebody, you're just laughing at their misery, but it's all kind of contained within the game, right? There's no other like sort of meta game outside of the game sort of reaction that you're expecting from them. They then, if, you know, they're really tired of getting corpse camped, might ask their, /1 in the area and be like, hey, can somebody help me out? And then, you know, those people might get together, and there's all this sort of natural interaction between these players grows. But in stream sniping, I feel like there's that extrinsic satisfaction that players are getting, the stream snipers, I should say, are getting, where they're not looking for satisfaction within the game. They're looking to these sort of outside reactions. They're looking for the stream's reaction. They're looking for the stream sniper's reaction, or the streamer's reaction. And all of that is sort of outside of the game. And I feel like that kind of goes against, you know, how Classic, I feel like, naturally, or how players in Classic naturally interact with each other. And so I think that's kind of where the dividing line, for me at least, is where corpse camping is okay, but stream sniping is kind of, it's boring, in my opinion. That's really what it comes down to.
Fair enough. All right. Well, look, mate, we might round it up there. I've got another call I've got to run to, but also we've pretty much, kept it tight within this, window of time I wanted to allocate to this one. You've raised some amazing points, both yourself and Tim. And look, I just want to say to the listeners, like I said, we've now heard both arguments. And if you want to contact me and say, Josh, get me on the show, I need to provide another point of view, I need to retort to some of these things that I've heard, we've kind of covered it for now. So I don't think I'll return to this topic for a little while. I think we've heard enough over the last sort of, over what is now about an hour's worth of calls over the past 2 weeks. So kick off the conversations in the Discord, chat with the community, get your point of view out there. Obviously, we all chat very respectfully about, the back and forths over how people feel about this. But, I think the show's pretty much, put everything out there in a really respectful and mature way. So I've got people like you to thank for that, Shammy, and I look forward to seeing you around the Discord.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me on it. Hey, if this conversation continues, I've got a bunch of other points lined up. I mean, it's a fascinating discussion for me. So, but yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure, mate. And that's the show for today, everyone. But be sure to listen in next week, as we'll have more Classic chat for you then. So please keep tuning in for more Countdown to Classic. But before you go, let's have some fun and see if we can go through all the thank yous in one breath, as we do here on the show. Here we go with a thank you to the following amazing patrons. 8 Count, AeroPC, Anti, Bear of Pain, Binger, Brandon K, Callum F, Chunky Dunk, CJ, Connor C, Damien A, David F, David J, Dufficus, Goat Rope, Halsey Spartan, Herbert, James S, Jamie S, John HC, Josh W, KSir37, Michael H, Minoru, Patrick J, Randall H, Rasmus S, Rarebit, Rick S, Ryan K, Sylvia K. I swear I'm getting closer. Sylvia K, Tim B, Tim S, Tom S, Twigs, and Zudamos. And of course, the very dedicated, legendary patrons of Countdown to Classic. An extra special shout out and thank you from the bottom of my heart to those who dig very deep for the show every month. In Billy C, Eric S, Firespittin' Kitten, Flosy B, Freaky Fritz, Galgamir, Ida B, Batlord, Carl W, Nick B, Palfurus, Sierra S, Surnami, The Anton, Wilson Mar, Vanafak, and Velarco. Thank you so much to all of you for your phenomenal support of the show. Countdown to Classic would not be on the air right now without your support. So that's it for today. Have a great rest of the week, everyone. I'll see you all next time.